disclaimer. Strap in. Almost swore, but I know we can't do that. We're trying not to do that until 5 minutes in. Okay. Long time coming. We feel prepared. Somewhat, maybe. I don't know.
I don't know if there was a level of preparedness. Like, the way that we do things is you're a week of hard studying, a week onto another subject. There's people that have studied the Roman Empire for their entire lives. There's people with doctorates that have been doing this for 30 or 40 years. And hearing them explain it, they have a pretty good understanding of it. We have an understanding of the nuts and bolts. There's so many little crevices and conspiracies to dive down to. It's just impossible to do.
Okay, so it's not the Roman Empire per se.
No.
But it's Julius Caesar, who essentially is probably, if you were like someone name a Roman, Polanski, no. It's gonna be JC. So with the Roman Empire being this shrinking in size and scope and all that kind of stuff, but being this insanely long-standing empire throughout history, it's kind of hard to kind of backdate everything and explain how we got to this point. There are a few key points that we're going to start on when we actually get into the episode. But Caesar is just this small portion, but such an impactful portion. And, most people have a basic understanding of Julius Caesar. Guy got stabbed in the Senate. Why did he get stabbed? Well, maybe he was a dictator or a king or something like that. But how did he get to that point? It's not just a snap your fingers and all of a sudden this guy snuck into power. This was a long time coming.
We're talking about a guy that was so important in history that he single-handedly ended the Roman Republic.
Yes, and also the calendar in which we all go by is also the one that he introduced and standardized it. July right here, birthday. That's because he was born in that month. It got July. And then we're going to run into kind of at the tail end of his story, why we get the month of August.
Augustus.
So, okay, guys, it's going to be a long one. I'm not going to lie to you. There's a lot to cover here. The first part of this is just going to be trying to catch everyone up on the state of the Roman Empire, because you got to know what kind of the temperature is of Rome to know why a guy like Caesar is able to fit himself in there at just the right time.
Yeah, and it's everything that we talk about in the beginning is all going to play a part in how this all ends up. When I say that Julius was the man that ended the Roman Republic wasn't exactly thriving at the point in time when Julius came back. There's a lot of very fast and loose things that are happening within the Senate and consulship and who's ruling and who's coming back to force their hand in. Julius is just the guy that was so undeniably good at what he did that he forced their hands into calling him a king and then killing him, ending the Republic.
The man's got a salad.
Yeah, and a whole smoothie chain.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Remember, guys, wherever you listen to your podcast, 5 stars or whatever the highest rating is, it does a ton for us to go ahead and keep this thing moving along and actually progressing. Wherever you listen to us, hope you're enjoying. Comment if you have the availability to. You got anything?
No, let's get into Julius.
Let's get deep into Caesar. All right, so let's start out with a little glossary definition lesson here, because we're going to be throwing around a lot of words that don't have a lot of meaning today. And so it's important to know kind of when we address these people, what their positions and, where they're at kind of in the pecking order. Politically and militarily, a lot of these actually kind of cross each other, because militarily, you almost had to have a command position. You had to be serving in the Senate. You had to have a political position. But in order to get a political position, usually you had to serve in the military. So you have people serving in these like lesser command roles in order just to further their political careers, in order to then turn around and be able to take a chance to command a military campaign to pretty much enrich yourself.
Well, the social hierarchy of Rome at the time meant that if you were a landowner, you were already above the peasant class, you were already above the slaves. Being a landowner would then qualify you to go into the military.
To serve, not necessarily in a...
Yeah, so if you were able to pull it off, do something spectacular, be a hero in war, you would come back. You would be awarded with a civilian. It's a medal that we'll talk about that Caesar ends up getting.
If you were able to find glory.
Yeah, exactly.
Glory for Rome.
Then you could move up into kind of a higher class. And once you're up into the higher class, it's going to make it a lot easier to get into the Senate. If you can get into the Senate, then you can go back into the military and get these higher positions. Or you can just be born into basically the, not the proletariat, bourgeoisie class.
Yeah.
If you're in the bourgeoisie class, you can either start running up the poll for Senate or you can start making a military move.
Do all of them.
Yeah, your life is so much better at that point in time.
Little Whitman sampler. Okay.
Yeah.
So politically, we have the consul. Now, the consul is the highest ranking elected official. Basically, he is the president, but there are two consuls that serve at the same time. So you're co-presidents.
Did they steal that idea from the Spartans? Because didn't the Spartans have two kings?
They loved the Greek shit.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised. You then had, and they had both military and civic authority. So while you're serving as consul, you can still be going out with your own army, conquering shit. And it happens a lot. That's kind of, being consul doesn't mean you're going to go ahead and take a break. For some, maybe. But for others, it's just like, oh no, I just have more power now, but I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing because I'm getting rich doing it. You then had praetors, who were elected as well. Everyone was kind of elected. But these were like the commanders of the legions, and they were basically provided lawfully to administer justice. So I guess like police, kind of. You then had a proconsul, who was a former consul or praetor, but that was serving as like the governor of like a Roman territory or an army commander.
Yeah, the fact that we couldn't go with a different word besides consul feels wrong.
Militarily, we have the legatus, who is the highest rank in a legion. And a legion is a body of troops usually numbering somewhere between 5,000 and 6,000. You then had a tribune, who was a senior officer, which was also then a senatorial rank. So it crossed over. This was like the one rank, I think, that kind of like was addressed the same. Mm-hmm. And then you had the centurions, who were more strictly military, but they were commanders, like a sergeant would be, or like a platoon leader. So they were basically commanding these 80 to 100 man groups within the legions. And they were kind of the guys that were in charge of training, battlefield command. They were the troops on the ground, like during fights and everything. Nationalities. We have the Celts, the Gauls, and the Gallic people, all the same. So if we use those interchangeably, basically this is describing anyone who was these tribes living in what would be modern day France, also part of like the Iberian Peninsula at the time. We then have the Germanic peoples, which were on the other side of the Rhine, as you can imagine, more modern day Germany.
We have the Gauls that are up in Britain, that are the Briton Gauls.
But we're going to call them the Britons.
Yes.
So just to distinguish. So that's about all I can think of for the actual definition portion of our episode. So
we'll revisit this too, because we're going to be talking about a lot of these things. Kind of the easiest way to start would be, there were two brothers. I want to say it was like mid 100s BC. So we're talking BCE. We're talking before Jesus was born. This is the Roman Empire that has already established that they're out of kingship. They went ahead and I believe they had like 5 kings before they ended up calling it quits, moving to a republic. Probably had something to do with their incursions into Greece and seeing democracy in action. Figured they wanted to go that way. From then on, they have moved into this republic where there's a voting class that puts these people into the Senate, and they serve. This blows me away. Everybody serves 1 year in political office. Now, you can try to run again for like a senatorship or something like that, and you're basically in check once a year. Mm-hmm. So you got to get shit done as soon as possible. Also, at the same time, to be a consul and have 1 year in power, it's kind of perfect because you can't really build up like a power force in case you want to just go ahead and go back to a kingship. You got to really focus
on like important things, or really have a lot of people on your side to get anything accomplished, because usually one side, and there were usually a division of, just like we fucking have today, 2 major parties that were divided in the Senate. You would be trying to get 2 guys in your own party to serve as co-consuls. The kind of kicker there is if the other party got one of their guys in, you were going to run into a lot of headaches because the guy that's supposed to be kind of co-leading with you is basically a political enemy at that point.
Yeah, unless you just run over him like Caesar does.
Yeah. So we come to these brothers, the Gracchus brothers, and just long story short, because we can't get too far into Roman history here, they're able to enact these changes, maybe not personally, but kind of maybe by even association. They essentially create this position called the tribune of the plebes. The plebes are essentially the people. And the reason that this was such an important position, it was a representative elected by the people that was like of the people. So it wasn't these senators, it wasn't these people in the army. It could be just kind of a normal person.
Yeah.
You would be able to, in this position, veto things from the Senate and also from the consuls.
Huge.
I mean, a representative of the people could just shoot down these things if it wasn't in the best interest of the people. So as you can imagine, if you're in the Senate or you are in the consul position, you're really wanting to be on this person's good side. And this person being not on your, if you're not on the good side, this person can just shoot down everything you're trying to do. So from a political standpoint, not probably the biggest fan of the tribune of the plebes from either the Senate or the consuls.
No, not at all. There were other actions that they did. They actually doubled the size of the Senate, which more representation for the people who are electing these members of the Senate in there. You're basically trying to please less people as a senator as the Senate grows. So more important to listen to who wants the help.
Mm-hmm. Who lives in the 8 houses around you.
Yeah. They also kind of took on a problem that Rome was having because, like we just explained, in order to be in the military, you had to be a landowner. Now, if you go off and you're fighting in a war for 3 years and you aren't able to come back and turn a crop every single year, you're going to fall behind on your payments. And when you fall behind on your payments and you lose your land, you get taken out of the military. But at the same time, the Senate, the bourgeoisie, has now swept in and purchased your land. Yeah. So we have a concentration of land ownership to the higher ranks in society, but at the same time, you also have
imagine that.
Yeah, you have a shrinking army, which is a huge problem because this is back at a time where when we're talking about Hannibal, when we're talking about the Punic Wars that are going on, that's just the wars with Carthage. Yeah. That's not all of the other wars that are going on all around in different areas.
It's always going on because you're always encroaching into somebody else's place to try to claim that as your own.
So if you have a shrinking army and you're still going out and fighting, that's going to be an issue.
This was at a time when you had kind of like what you would consider the way we recognize armies now, a standing national army. Mm-hmm. When you're losing people in your national army, you have to start making these changes to either A, grow the national army, or find another way that you're able to kind of raise these troops and forces. The change here essentially becomes, instead of having a national army to where the Senate or the consul is kind of directing these forces, you have these people that are in the Senate or consuls that are normally very wealthy individuals. Mm. They go out and simply raise their own armies, and they're paying their armies. Rome is like, oh yeah, fucking go off and just go conquer these areas, but you're doing it in the name of Rome because technically, you have our blessing to go do this. It's our permission. You can fly the standard of Rome, all that good shit. And when you get all of this booty and all this loot from all these places, send back a portion of it, as your tithing or whatever it is to Rome. But the rest of that's yours. That's your personal wealth that you're growing. And then you use that money to then pay the troops that you've then hired to do this stuff.
Yeah. And the Gracchuses noticed that the top end was very heavy and it was going to be really hard to redistribute everything. But what you could do is you could raise a middle class up into the upper class by taking, I believe they were called the horsemen, the cavalry or whatever. And they were basically made tax collectors in the eastern lands. Mm-hmm. Asia was the cash cow for Rome at this time. Yeah. They were bringing everything out of Asia. So if you can raise a class of people and say, you are going to be the tax collectors, go over there, find what you want. We need a minimum of this amount of money that you can promise us. Mm-hmm. And if you can promise us an amount of money we're happy with, we'll send you over there. You send us that money back. If you start collecting a little on the side, it's a cost of doing business. Yeah. It's a very important thing. So even though he didn't raise the lower class, he brought a middle class higher up into the upper class, which throws off the balance of power because you're putting more money in more people's pockets.
Mm-hmm. And now you have the ability essentially to have all of these almost like private armies, which is also supposed to, I'm not sure what the thought process here is. It's supposed to balance power, because then you couldn't have one person only commanding the national army. And if they were loyal to one person, you would pretty much be able to do what you wanted to do. By raising these private armies at your own cost, that's kind of how you balance your power against like another senator or, somebody else like that's a rival.
The thing about it is, though, is you can't be in charge of an army if you were in Rome.
I like this. So Rome has this thing where it's completely sacred, but you were not able to. There were areas that were only considered Rome. And it wasn't just all of Italy. It was these areas that were concentrations of like these long-standing like Roman cities and everything. But everything else was just considered kind of like Roman territory. Within these made-up boundaries around these cities, no one was allowed to carry a weapon. The only people that were allowed to carry weapons, I want to say, were like the Praetorian Guard that were like the police force of the cities. I mean, you could sneak in a dagger or something like that, but you weren't bringing in armor, swords, shields, chair, all that kind of shit. What that made is so you couldn't do these coups, because if you started even getting close to these areas and you started to cross with your military, all of a sudden they know you're trying to do this and you're getting all these other guys raising their private armies against you.
And there's one line you can't cross. That's
it is
a line in northern Italy.
What is it?
The Rubicon River.
That's right.
When you cross the Rubicon River, you immediately become an enemy of the state if you don't disband your military immediately. And there's issues there, too, because if you come back into town, we'll talk about these tributes that they do. But when you come back into town, if you completely blow up your army, all of these other guys that have private armies around, people need work. If you have good soldiers, you're not getting the old gang back together if you go out on another.
I mean, you have soldiers that are loyal to you because you've treated them well, you've paid them well, but these guys are kind of mercenaries. It's just, they're for hire and they need to work.
Yeah.
And so if we're going to run into this specifically with Caesar, but you have these situations where, so he's leading this army, he's on campaign, and they come to him, they're like, if you want to even run for this political position, you got to disband this army. You're not allowed to have this if you even want to have the chance at running. Or you can take this other, you can, choose door B or door number 2 and see what you get out of that. But we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Well, to finish up the Gracchuses, of course, social reforms that are helping the plebes don't usually go over well in the Senate. Both of them come to very untimely ends and deaths.
Yes.
Via most likely Senate-induced murder.
There's a lot of Senate-induced murder. It seemed to be like not insanely uncommon.
So when we talk about political deaths in the fall of the empire, or the fall of not the empire still goes on for fucking ever after this.
The Republic.
The fall of the Republic wasn't just Caesar. There were already cracks in the concrete that they were using to try to keep this republic together. Our next move is going to be directly tied into Caesar when we start talking about a name, Gaius Marius. Gaius Marius was actually Caesar's uncle through marriage to Julius's aunt, Julia. And
a lot of commonalities.
Yes, there is.
Not a lot of creativity within these families.
We'll talk about the names as far as Julius and the family names and all that stuff when we get to them. But just understand that I don't know what his mom's name was, but literally everybody that was a sister, an aunt, or a daughter to him, everybody was Julia. This is like George Foreman's family.
His mom's name started with like an A.
Okay, so not Julia. Julia?
Yeah.
Well, she was from a different family, so she wouldn't have the Julius.
That's true.
Yeah.
So Gaius Marius, this guy he's not super well known. The name probably doesn't sound familiar to a lot of you, but there were also Julius Caesars before Julius Caesar.
Gaius Marius.
Yeah. Well, no, I understand that. But what I'm saying is these names essentially, you only know kind of the famous ones.
Yeah.
So part of his greatest hits, he had these, and military victories are what's going to get you on people's lips. He did this thing called the Cimbric War, and the Cimbric War was fought against a collection of Gaelic, Celts, Gauls, whatever you want to call them, and some Germanic tribes that had kind of formed this coalition. He ends up beating them. You get a victory against the Jugurthan people. in North Africa, what would basically be modern day Algeria. And during the time of this guy's run, he serves as consul 7 times. And this is at a time, and correct me if I'm wrong here, because I want to say it was this dude named Sulla that we'll talk about here more in depth. He's the one that starts the stipulation about the time frame between consulships, right?
He pushes for it. So this is incredible because this is how these two end up starting to run afoul of each other. Gaius Marius is working under a guy named Scipio Africanus, who was the son of the Scipio Africanus that ended up beating Hannibal.
Yeah.
So we're talking about close to that time frame and after.
Which, fucking awesome name.
Yeah,
Still an awesome name.
So cool. When Scipio was asked who was going to bring the fight to North Africa when he was gone, he patted Gaius Marius on the back and he said, if I'm gone, this is the guy that's going to take care of this issue. They're down fighting in North Africa. There was a guy named Lucius Cornelius Sulla Felix. I don't know where the fuck the Felix comes from. We're just going to call him Sulla because it's a sweet name. He would end up gaining glory during this Jugurthan War that Chris was talking about because he was actually the guy that threw the Numidian king in chains and brought him back. Now, the Numidians, as we talked about in the
one of the past episodes.
It was the, Jesus, I just said his name. Hannibal.
Yeah.
The Hannibal episode. The Numidians were fantastic horseback archers. They were incredible. They could launch these guerrilla campaigns to where the Romans could never spot them long enough to kill them before they would retreat away. So they were getting their asses kicked in North Africa. All of a sudden, they're trying to figure out how this all works. Who's going to be the guy that steps up? Gaius Marius is the guy that steps up. He starts taking it to the Numidians. They start winning this war, and then all of a sudden, Sulla shows up with the Jugurthan. It was called the Jugurthan War because I think the guy's name was Jugurtha that was the leader of the Numidians.
Okay.
He brings him in chains. So immediately Sulla, this lower ranking member of the military, gets a hell of a lot of praise for fighting this Jugurthan War, while Gaius was the one that was actually winning the war.
Yeah.
This kind of starts them down this weird...
it's a rivalry.
Yeah, except for it's Gaius Marius, who, as Chris said, goes on to be named consul like 7 times. He's named consul in absentia while he's out fighting these different Gallic tribes. The Cimbri and the Teutons that Chris was talking about, these Germanic peoples that were Gauls that came over, they posed a pretty big threat. And they were, at one point in time, the Cimbri had surrounded Gaius Marius's forces. And I don't know how they learned this. I don't know how the language worked back then. But apparently Gaius Marius is like, we don't know these guys. We don't know how they fight. We need to sit back and watch them. Eventually, the Cimbri got bored of watching them. Like, peace, we're headed to Rome. We'll see you guys later. We'll tell your wives hello.
Yeah.
I don't know how in the world that was translated correctly. Maybe later on.
I don't know how you would remember the words. Honestly, with a lot of these guys being, even the guys that were serving under the commanders were sometimes senators. These were educated people who probably also brought along with these troops. They're like, when you're moving through these areas, you're also conquering these people. By part of conquering them is you're then conscripting them into your army to be fighting for you. So basically, you're fighting this town, and then you're like, okay, now we're going to go fight this next town, but you guys are going to fight with us. And they're like, but we know those guys. Are like, perfect. Tell us all about them. Do you speak their language? Yes, we speak their language. I'm guessing it was, you always probably had people from the next town over that could tell you what was going on.
But these Cimbri were so bad that they brought their women and children along with them. And their women would sit there and yell at the soldiers on the battlefield that if you didn't do this, we were going to pick up your swords and fight for you.
Yeah.
If you run, you're going to run into us and we're going to kill you instead of them killing you.
It's basically what I imagine a softball league in like New York and New Jersey would be, where all the wives are like, you better fucking do it, honey.
Yeah. So he ends up wiping through the Cimbri. Then he ends up wiping through the Cimbri's wives and children because they pick up the swords. They fight too.
There are no good people throughout this entire story. There's some genocide. There's war crimes. There's all this shit.
Yeah, in the vacuum of the time, it's morally none of this is good, but in the vacuum of the time, this was unfortunately just like daily occurrences.
Business as usual.
Yeah. So after wiping out the Cimbri, he actually goes down, and the Teutons are fighting a different branch that was sent out that wasn't led by Marius. But of course, Marius sees how the Cimbri fought. He ended up beating them. He actually strategically positioned his troops on the two outside flanks because he knew that the center mass would always pull in. So if his outside guys on the flanks could go in there and kill the Teutons, he would get all the glory for it. Sulla was working under the other guy as this whole thing is going on that was supposed to be in the middle.
He's like, this fucking guy again.
Yeah, and the whole entire time, Marius, I'm sure, knows where Sulla is. It's in the back of his mind because he ends up getting a military tribute when he goes back for catching the Jugurthan king. And Marius ends up beating the Teutons as well.
So these tributes, they're tributes, they call them triumphs. There's also a thing they call Thanksgiving. So the difference between these, because we'll kind of use them, kind of showing what accolades these guys are getting when they're on campaign. Triumph or a tribute is basically like a celebrate. It's a fucking parade is what it is. You get to come in. I don't know if you get to bring in your soldiers, but you get to come in yourself and like march down. You're supposed to bring the spoils that you've captured with you and have this wagon train, and everybody comes out and sucks your dick.
So a lot of slaves.
Yeah.
Whatever precious resources you bring back.
Yeah, they're taking everything. People, anything not bolted down, they're taken back to Rome. You then have these things that are Thanksgivings. There's a Roman term for it, but they call them Thanksgivings. And it's this basically a day long, or however many days you want to do it, but it's this prayer that they're saying. And so basically it's more of a religious aspect to it. Yeah. I'm sure if you ask them what it sounds like, the Thanksgivings were offered out a little bit more because it's easier just to be like, yeah, everyone just throw up a quick, Hail Mary for whoever is fighting over in Gaul right now.
Stay in your houses till noon, pray till noon, everybody get back to work.
Yeah. The parades were saved for some pretty major shit. So he's offered a pretty big deal because he gets a triumph, I think.
Yeah. And to go along with that, the Senate isn't really happy because Marius just keeps winning these consulships over and over and over again. But he's winning the consulships because the people are seeing what he's doing out there fighting these major forces and sending all of the spoils back. Not really a whole lot that the Senate can do at this point in time.
He's also making other people rich, which is how he has these political alliances in the Senate. Because while the senators are essentially represented by the people, it kind of works in the way that the senators are who elect the consuls. And so it kind of, you can have senators that might go against their people, but they're not going to be reelected. It's the same kind of shit that we're dealing with now.
And Sulla ends up being moved under the proconsul that's working with Marius. His name is Cadalus. He was under his command. There were repeated attempts to gain political power on Sulla's part. He ends up getting moved under a guy named Lucius Porcius Cato, who is going to be very important in this story. His son will. Cato ends up dying in the Battle of Marseilles.
Cato Sr.
Ends up dying in the Battle of Marseilles. Sulla is given supreme command of this southern theater. He ends up scoring multiple victories, and Sulla's like, okay, I won. I'm headed back. I am going to stand for consulship. I'm disbanding this part of my army. I'm going to show up in town. 88, he ends up being elected along with this guy named Quintus Pompeius Rufus. And this basically starts these civil wars because the Marius faction isn't pumped that Sullus, who took the glory away from Marius before, there's a fracture among the Senate. And when you get a fracture among the Senate, you'll get a fracture among the people. When you get a fracture among the people, you end up getting wars fought against each other.
So we are counting down, so you're not hearing things. But again, we're in before Common Era. So as we count down, we're getting closer. So we are going forward in time. We're not that high yet.
Sometimes you got to go backwards to go forward.
So once this proconsul deal, and you would be elected in 89 in this situation to serve your consulship in, and it was the calendar year essentially for whatever they were measuring that. So as he's getting elected in, now he's got enough power and enough sway that he's going to make things very difficult for Gaius.
Sulla goes out on command during this first consulship. Once your year runs out, you aren't consul anymore.
Yeah.
Sulla didn't like that. Sulla ends up coming back from battle, and Sulla does something very reminiscent of what Caesar is going to do, and he crosses the Rubicon with his forces.
Mm-hmm.
As he crosses the Rubicon with his forces, he takes the consulship a second time. Except for now, a word that I didn't realize the Romans had created, dictator.
Yeah.
It becomes a dictatorship. These dictatorships were handed out as far as special powers under, like, I want to say it was like a certain amount of time.
Yeah, and it was
times
like
of crisis.
6 months was like a long time for this. But just, we have a much different definition for it now, but it was a very literal definition. You were the one that dictated what was going to happen. You had full control in those times of crisis or those times of war.
It feels more like modern day martial law almost.
Yeah. So I think with Sulla, his big thing was like, I wasn't even there. And they're like, you know that even though you're not there, you're still consul. You choose not to be there. And he's like, yeah, but I had my army and shit, and I didn't want to do all that kind of stuff. I wanted to go back and get him so I could go back out on campaign. They end up getting into it enough so to where Gaius doesn't feel safe. I'll call him Marius now because Gaius are going to come up into play and it's going to get confusing. So Marius doesn't really feel like the winds are kind of in his direction. He ends up getting exiled to Africa in 88. So in the same year that Sulla is serving as consul.
It's elected consulship.
Yeah, he gets exiled to Africa. We come to what's known as the Octavian War of 87 BC. Now, you get this guy named Gnaeus Octavius against this guy named Lucius Cornelius Cinna. Both of these guys are consuls in 87. So you had Sulla serving.
It was time in between.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So you had Sulla serving in 88, 87. Again, you're having two new guys every year. So, and it's crazy that these guys are literally going to war and they're the co-presidents. So that it's Wild West shit. So both consuls, because he is this known military, known proven commander, Marius is still in North Africa. Cinna's like, I'm going to go fucking tap this guy and have him work with my armies because I know he can raise troops. He's got a proven record. The people up here there's still a ton of people that like him. Yeah. He didn't want to go down to Africa. So he ends up getting Marius and they beat Octavius. They end up taking Rome and they're like, well, since we're here and no one's really going to argue with us, we're going to go ahead and be the new co-consuls for the next year, 86 BC.
And this is where Sulla comes back?
So Sulla hasn't come back yet.
Okay.
Marius ends up dying like 17 days on the job. And the reason why is because even though they got to Rome, they just beat Sulla to Rome.
Yeah.
In a lot of these situations, it's just going to be who gets there first. It's, you know, I got here first, tag. This is mine. I'm on base. So during this time, and we'll have to kind of bounce back and forth because some of the stuff that is going on with Caesar is happening during this time frame. So we'll have to kind of back that up just a little bit. But Sulla is like, yeah, I'm not giving up on this. Like, just because you guys have Rome, it doesn't mean like, oh man, you beat me there. I just have to accept you guys are there. Yeah, no kidding. So we come to, there's a lot of civil wars in this, but it's Sulla's civil war, which was 83 to 82 BC. And Sulla ends up, because all of a sudden, Cinna's great military general is dead, 17 days on the job. He's not really, he has commanded troops. He has won victories. That's how he got into the consulship. But the guy he's going up against, Sulla, is regarded as like one of the greatest at the time military minds.
Badass.
So this guy's scared shitless and ends up, just like it's probably expected, Cinna really can't do anything to keep him in. Keep him out, I mean. He gets in, but Cinna's trying to keep him out.
And Cinna ends up being overthrown. We see a republic where one man overthrows another man to become consul with dictatorial powers. It doesn't quite feel like a republic, so maybe this is when the republic goes really for the first time. But at the same time, it's gone for good after Caesar, because we still will go back to this consulship idea after Sulla goes down.
So we're going to back up a little bit now because we do have to introduce the main character of our story and kind of bring you up to speed on what he's doing at the time when Sulla comes in and takes over again.
Yeah. So we start out with Gaius Julius Caesar. We're back on the Gaius train. Julius is actually kind of basically like their surname. It's where they trace their family lineage back. And the Julius lineage goes back very, very far. So usually when you talk about a family's genus, it starts with a penis. But in this case...
It starts with a Venus.
It starts with a Venus. Aphrodite, the goddess of love, was co-opted into being Venus in the Roman Greek pantheon.
The old Roman rebrand.
Yep.
Yeah, so how the name works out, personal, clan, family branch. So Gaius is his personal name, named after Gaius Marius, I'm assuming probably.
Maybe. Yeah, I could see that.
Julius being the clan name, and then Caesar being the family branch. So he's born in the month of July, 100 BC is kind of what the common or the agreement is on that.
Hilarious that we can get to the 12th or 13th of July, 100 BCE, and Henry Hudson was just kind of like, yeah, he was born.
Yeah, but I mean, this guy's pretty fucking famous, and so they were going to track back his family lineage.
Yeah, we're talking about 1,600 years later.
I know, man. So, fun fact, the name Caesar that they used as their family branch may have actually been gained and had something to do with an ancestor, like killing an elephant, like
Pretty
during
cool.
battle.
Yep.
So I guess Caesar was the name of like the translation of elephant in some language. I'm not sure exactly what it was.
And supposedly, I don't remember if it was Alexander's elephants or if it was Hannibal's elephants, but one of them got taken down.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, you got to tie it to one of those guys.
Yeah.
Everything you got to do, you got to tie it to Alexander, you got to tie it to Hannibal.
Mm-hmm.
So, like you said, claimed descendants, this is where we get the Julius from Julius, who was the son of Aeneas, who was the son of Venus, who had no penis.
And that's how their genus came around.
That's how their genus is. So, I mean, Caesar's family, his father had served as a governor, right?
Not yet.
Okay.
He was born in this place called Subura, Rome. It was kind of like not necessarily a slum, but not a great part of Rome. Shockingly enough, he did not have a cesarean birth because the cesarean section, the cutting open of a woman to pull a child out, is known as a cesarean birth. They believe it was named after Caesar because that's how he was born. It's not exactly true because his mother actually lived until he was like 40. And back in Roman times, a cesarean birth was only performed to save the child while the mother was dying.
Yeah, and the mother never survived as cesarean. It wasn't like we're scheduling it.
Yeah, no, this was probably the panic button trying to deliver a child. Mm-hmm. As Chris said, they were born upper middle class, but they didn't really have a fortune.
Which was kind of weird because these families that had this kind of lineage, like being like, basically they were low class for what they were high class. So they were in that high echelon, but they were at the lowest rung of that. And they were only there because of their name. They weren't really cashing in, I guess, on their name or making the best of it. Yeah.
The family would claim consulship in their lineage through Gaius Marius, as we said. He married Caesar's father's sister. So all of a sudden now we have this tie-in of having a consul very close. Gaius Marius 91 BC, or 91 and 90, his first two consulships. You suddenly have a little bit of cachet, and it doesn't really kind of make you surprised that Caesar's father would then be elected praetor. So basically like a governor of Asia in an area of Asia for 2 years from 90.
That's proconsul. So praetor is the commander of the legions.
Gotcha. From 91 and 90. So Marius, first 2 years, 91 and 90, makes sense that he would hand his brother-in-law Asia. But it finally gave the money or the family a little bit of money.
Who's watching Asia right now? My brother-in-law needs something to do.
He's kind of an idiot, but he says that they go all the way back to Venus. It might look good. He might impress a few people.
What's the furthest place we have right now? Asia? Just send him there.
Yeah. Asia being the cash cow, though, it was a pretty good come-up. Caesar begins his political rise as he was named the Flamen Dilas, which was the priest of Jupiter. This happens, I believe, as he's a teenager. Of course, in order to form your political rise, as we were just talking about, you have to form a religious base in order to try to raise yourself into those echelons.
But it doesn't mean anything from how you have to behave as far as your character goes. It's just what shows how, like, meaningless it actually is. The reason that he's given this title is usually when you take these, you do have to take some vows. But by doing this, you're essentially saying, I am not going to go into politics. Part of this priesthood is the caveat is that, like, hey, I'm agreeing not to go into this. Also, to kind of sweeten the deal as far as like a political connection, which he's not going to be able to use by taking this priesthood, is he ends up marrying Cinna's daughter. So we now have the tie to Gaius Marius, who is married into the family, his uncle. Mm-hmm. And now we have the fact that he's married to Cinna's daughter, who are going to be these two fucking consuls who get overthrown by Sulla.
Yeah, which unfortunately becomes a crutch to him. Mm-hmm. 84 BCE. Caesar's father dies while he's tying his sandal. He bent down to tie his sandal. Sounds like he had a heart attack. Yeah, I'm not sure why you would have to tie your sandal. I feel like we took some
tying your own damn sandals?
We took some artistic. Yeah, you were a proconsul. You were a governor. So now Caesar has to step up because his sisters, both named Julia the elder and Julia the younger, probably aren't going to be off doing a whole lot of marrying into more consular families because now Sulla's in charge.
And Sulla has the list. So this list is a proscription list.
I thought it was prescription. Okay.
Proscription list.
So there's conscription to go into the military. There's proscription.
If you're on a death list. And it's a prescription if you're trying to get drugs. So this ties right in. 84 BC, his dad dies. 83, Sulla's civil war happens. People are watching this in Rome, and they're like, Caesar's watching this, and he's like, I have so many ties to the guys that are going to be on the losing side of this. Sulla ends up getting back and makes these lists called the proscription list, where basically all of his political rivals or anyone he thinks are going to rise up against him or try to, a threat to his regime, he puts them on a list. If your name is on this list, it is, what's the movie called where people just have the one? It's Purge.
Yeah.
If you're on the list, it's basically the purge. Like anyone can kill you. You actually get paid if you bring the head of one of these people on the list, which there are many, many mistakes and people getting killed.
Yeah.
People start getting added on this list, not because they're political enemies, but because when they kill these people, their property goes back to like the state. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes Sulla's writing names down the list. He's like, which one of these guys own the vineyard? And so
I like that wine.
Yeah. So Caesar is pretty scared shitless. Sulla gets back and he's like, all right, here's the deal. You're going to go ahead and divorce Cinna's daughter. And he's like, no, I don't think I'm going to do that.
Kind of like her.
Yeah. And I don't even know if he liked her that much. I just think he was, at that point, he wasn't kowtowing. And maybe it was just dumb youth that was still kind of at play. But he's smart enough to be like, I probably shouldn't have said that to his face. And he goes into hiding where Sulla can't find him. Eventually through, the Senate is still going this entire time, which is insane because it never stops. During all of these civil wars that we're going to talk about, the Senate's still just doing its thing back in Rome.
Sometimes effectively, sometimes not.
Yeah.
But they're always still pretty much intact.
So through some maneuvering in the Senate and some of these people that are in Sulla's ear, they're like, listen, you need to allow Caesar to come back. There's a bunch of people that he could be, there's a bunch of people that are complaining that he's not here. It could be a bigger problem to not have him here than to just allow him back in. And then we can just send him away or do something like that. So through this agreement, he's like, I'm not dropping, he doesn't have to divorce her, but he's given up the priesthood. And I think Caesar at that point was just kind of like, okay.
Cool, man.
Yeah, it wasn't doing me a lot of favors anyway. And ends up dropping the priesthood and is technically allowed to come back into Rome. He's basically just not on the list anymore. He's like, you're off the list. It's when the Steve Buscemi crosses the list, Billy Madison off the list.
If I'm Caesar, I want to make sure that every single one of those prescription lists with my name on it is gone. I don't want there to be any accidents where there's someone
didn't get an updated copy.
Yeah, exactly.
So he ends up being like, you know what? Probably the heat is kind of off me, but at the same time, I need to be forgotten about for a little bit. So he goes to serve the governor of Asia, which was the role previously done by his father, named Marcus Thermus. Fantastic fucking name. And during this time frame, he ends up going to this place called, is it
Bithynia?
Bithynia. And Bithynia is ruled by this guy named King Nicomedes
The fourth.
And he may or may not or may have had sex and deflowered a young Caesar.
But kind of cool, because that ends up earning him the nickname among the troops as the Queen of Bithynia. Apparently, Nicomedes had a penchant for young men, and he got himself a hold of some Caesar. So Caesar
had himself some salad, baby.
Yeah, he tossed a few salads. Apparently, Caesar, at this point in time, there was this weird kind of beatnik youth movement where Caesar was looked at differently because he wore these red boots and he had frills on his tunic and he would wear his belt slung low on his hips.
Flair.
Yeah, that's kind of what it sounds like. So apparently this was right up Nicomedes' alley, and they may or may not or probably had sex. And I don't know what it does, but I think it always kind of eats away at Caesar, because eventually in his life, he would go out and make a proclamation to the public that he did not have sex with Nicomedes. Mm-hmm. And he's also...
did not have sexual relations with that king.
He
got a royal title out of it, though, so I'm not really sure what the huge complaint is.
You're queen, man. Shut the fuck up. He becomes a voracious sexual deviant who will come back when we talk about his time in Rome and have sex with allies' wives, with friends' wives, probably with a few friends. And
enemies' wives. No one's safe from Caesar.
Queens, people abroad, just pretty much anybody that Caesar can get his hands on.
The man leaves a body count.
Yes.
In so many different ways.
Every way. He would end up winning the Civil Crown, which was the award that we were talking about earlier, in a war in Asia where he went and I believe he rescued one of the top members of the military from wherever they were being sieged upon.
Yeah, you didn't know? He rescued, so you had to be a citizen of Rome. You could be a subject of Rome, didn't make you a citizen. A citizen had to be, you had to do some shit and be born into certain circumstances to be a citizen. To save a citizen was a big deal. So yeah, he ends up winning that civic crown for basically saving a citizen on the Isle of Lesbos. And by getting this, he comes back to Rome. He gets, all of this praise. And this basically just whets his beak. He's like, ooh, praise. He's like, I'm so hard right now. Caesar wants some more. So good luck for him, because Sulla ends up dying in 78, and he's able to be like, now I can kind of come home full time and start building up this political career. I've already done the military thing where I can now get my foot in the door. And he ends up coming back. And a crazy thing about the Senate and how all these government appointments worked is if you were a proconsul, or you were serving as governor, or you were serving on the Senate, you could be doing all this shit, passing all these bills. If you were serving as a governor, you could be taking all these lands, war crimes, all that shit. You could not be tried until you were out of that position. So while you were sitting in that position, no one could bring charges against you, but people would fucking keep receipts.
I thought it was just the consul that couldn't be charged, because he brings multiple lawsuits against the pro-Sulla Senate members.
No, he does, but he also has the same thing done against him, even when he's just serving as a governor.
Okay.
So he ends up he's trying to basically kind of, I think, get his name out there and kind of make a name for himself. So he puts some guys on trial for corruption in 77 BC and kind of gets his name out there, gets some recognition, but he is not a great speaker.
No.
He doesn't have,
not yet.
He doesn't have those oratory skills, which you have to have. Some of these guys are not wealthy in the Senate, but they are such great speakers that they could just win a room over.
Get by, yeah. And kind of to put a little pin on Sulla's weird tenure as consul dictator, he only serves as dictator for 2 years and then he just retires.
Yeah.
He just goes off into the countryside. But of course, if he comes in then by 78 when he dies, clearly Caesar understood that just because Sulla was out of power didn't mean that if he showed back up and pissed off the right people that were still pro-Sulla.
He died. He didn't lose all his supporters. A couple of things that'll come that Sulla did that actually are going to have an impact is he enacted these rules to where a consul, you couldn't serve consecutively. He fucking hated Marius so much. He's like, no more of this 7-time bullshit. You have to serve. You have to essentially wait a 10-year cooldown period between these consulships. So that's going to come into play here in just a little bit. So in order to actually kind of beef up his speaking skills, he's like, I'm going to go ahead and go take some courses at the local university in Rhodes. So he ends up heading to Rhodes, and either on his way to Rhodes, or it might have been, it was on his way.
Oh, yes.
He ends up getting captured by pirates and bring him aboard. I don't know if they killed they had to have obviously killed a bunch of his men. I don't know if he was the only survivor, but these guys are kind of entertained by him. And it's kind of the situation like the Dread Pirate Roberts situation, except reversed, to where Caesar's basically like, oh, you guys wait till I get out of here. I'm going to fucking hunt you motherfuckers down. I'm going to tear out your insides. And they're just laughing. They're like, oh my God, Caesar, you're so funny. They go to offer, write up the ransom letter. And they're like, how much should we ask for this guy? And they end up asking, do you have the amount?
20.
So they ask for 20 talents, right? Mm-hmm. And a talent is a fucking lot of silver.
Good amount of money. Yep.
Yeah. And I imagine he looks over their shoulder. And he's like,
20.
That's fucking 20.
You know who you have?
Yeah.
I'm a descendant of Venus.
Yeah. Ask for way more than that. You guys should go ahead and ask for 50. No, here. And then he just takes the quill or whatever it is and writes in 50. Let me turn that 2 into a 5. Well, he ends up giving it back to some of his guys and they end up leaving. So the ship is obviously still intact.
Yeah. Basically what happens, they go on, they raid the ship. They end up taking Caesar. They take his doctor and they take 2 of the slaves onto land. They give them this 20 talents. He's like, you guys don't know what you're dealing with. I'm a 50 talent man if I'm a day old. Ask for 50 talents. My guys are good. They'll go out. They'll raise the money. They'll bring it back. They'll pay the bounty. Meanwhile, while he's on land with these pirates, he knows that he's going to speaker school. He knows he has to work on this. He starts telling them poetry. He starts kind of fraternizing to the point to where he's less a prisoner and more just like one of the dudes.
Is this a Tug Speedman Golden Triad?
Yeah.
Flaming Dragon situation where they're having him up on stage, except he's the one that's organizing. He's like, oh, wait, everyone sit down. I got a new one for you guys tonight. Sits up there, holds the skull.
He does the Macbeth lines that far in advance.
Way pre-Macbeth. So pirates are keeping him alive. They know they got to get this money.
Well, like you said, the whole time he's like, I'm going to get out of here, and then I'm going to come back.
Wait till my guys get back. Yep. We're not going to kill you then, but I'm going to go back. I'm going to raise a bunch of guys, and then I'm going to hunt you motherfuckers down. And they're just like, whatever, man, get out of here.
Sure, we'll never see your dumb ass again.
So he gets released.
50 Talent shows up. He gets released.
He goes back.
He goes to the next port. Yeah. He goes to the closest port to where he was held.
That's actually Roman.
Yeah.
Yeah. And because he is who he is, he's like, he's not carrying all this money around on him. A constant theme until a certain point is going to be him having to do shit to pay off these insane loans that he's taking out to be able to fund this kind of stuff. He ends up hiring a bunch of guys. They go back out. They actually find the pirates and he brings them back. Ends up having them crucified, which is going to be a big thing. It's going to happen in a lot of situations here.
Odd how the Jewish folks still get blamed for the crucifixion when it seems like the Romans were pretty big fans of crucifixion.
Mm-hmm. But he's not a guy that's, he had some fun times. Yeah, he had some fun times with them. They listened to his poetry. They gave him good feedback. And so in an act of mercy, he slits all their throats.
Wild.
Which is, as far as crucifixions go, from what I've heard, is the best thing that you can do to somebody before they're actually like raised up.
That or break their legs. Those are the two things.
I'd still go with the throat.
Yeah.
The legs are still going to take more time.
That way it works. At least the legs can't support you long enough for you to asphyxiate, because that's how you die in a crucifixion, is through asphyxiation. Through nothing else but that.
Yeah.
I'm sure when he went back and raised the army, he's probably like, hey, guys, I'm a little cash poor. The guys that we're going to go beat up and crucify, though, I know they have 50 talents.
That's true.
So if we get
that
over
could
there.
be my down payment for you guys.
This is killing the hooker in GTA. Like, you paid her to bang her.
They might have other stuff, too. Who knows who else they've robbed.
They got any booty? They didn't take my booty. Mm-hmm. What are you talking about? Hey, nothing. Just go get the 50 talents.
Nicomedes.
So yeah, after this happens, it's just like this is an everyday occurrence. He ends up going down to Rhodes and spending time in speaker school down there after he was just held captive by these pirates and then had them crucified. Mm-hmm. Like, when we talk about this was just a different world back then, it was just a different world and how all this stuff goes. It was, he didn't get a tribute or a Thanksgiving for killing these pirates. Eventually, one of his boys will. But the whole thing is just so nonchalant. It's so crazy how fast he can move up because he ends up being accepted in the aristocracy around 73.
Well, he actually serves in this thing called the Third Mithridatic War, which, you can guess there was two before that. So this is King Mithridates, who is kind of the kingdom of Pontus, and Pontus is Asia Minor, so Turkey, where Turkey is right now, and then also like the entire area surrounding the Black Sea.
Super smart guy.
Mithridates?
Yeah. He was the man who didn't want to be poisoned by any of his constituents, so he would actually drink little bits of poison to build up a tolerance to them.
Oh, he like the Iocane pattern, Princess Bride.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So, very smart man in thinking, well, they can't poison me to do this, right? Well, the way this Third Mithridatean War goes, not well in their favor. He's actually being kind of hunted down, and he doesn't want to give up into the Romans, so he goes ahead and tries to poison himself to kill himself.
Just makes him super sick, doesn't it?
There's a massive issue when you've made yourself good with poison is you can't poison yourself. So he had to pay a slave to kill him before the Romans came and got him. It's
not working.
Yeah. Could you imagine just it's coming out of both ends. You just swallowed a bunch of poison and then you have to pay a guy to off you, who I'm sure was a slave and probably like, yeah, dude, I'd have done this for free. The wars that he fights, just like we talked about in the earlier years, if you do well in war, if you have this civic crown, and then you go over and fight in this Third Mithridatean War, whatever Mithridates War, whatever you want to call it, you're going to come back and people are going to look at you a little bit different.
Looks pretty good on your resume.
Yeah. You end up being made pontiff, which I believe had to have been stolen by the Catholic Church because aren't they pontiffs?
Here's the thing. Romans, Roman Catholic Church, Catholic Church. It's all tied together, man.
In order to be elected a pontiff, what do you got to do? You got to start shelling out a little bit of money. You got to start greasing some palms. So you need to start going into debt to try to get this religious position or to get this next position in government with the hopes of going into further debt to climb the ladder even further.
The modern equivalent of this is going to medical school.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Actually, that's a perfect summary of what it is. 71 BCE, he gets elected to the military tribune, so now he can go out and raise an army and lead an army himself.
And he has that senatorial rank as well.
Yeah. He ends up serving in the war on Spartacus. I believe it was the third slave rebellion that had happened.
I think this might be punched up a little bit, just in the same way that his commentary
for him,
yes. Whatever, because I think the bulk of it was Pompey the Great and Marcus Crassus, who were the co-consuls at the time, that kind of took the lead on this, doing it was the Third Servile War.
That Servile was
yep. And so that episode is going to be fucking awesome, being able to talk about like Spartacus and that whole thing. But he kind of comes in on the tail end of that. And then I think a little bit of like revisionist history is maybe he added himself in as a little bit more of a key figure.
Why not?
Yeah. Who's going to fucking stop him from doing that, right?
He has a history of doing this. We'll talk about that later. But
in 69 BC.
Oh, we got to talk about how this war ended.
Oh, with the Appian Highway?
Yeah, what did Crassus do upon the Appian Highway?
Was it the Appian Highway?
6,000 slaves.
And he would have them, and he lined the entire highway. I can't remember where it stretched from. but it stretched all the way to Rome, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he crucified, I don't know what intervals, but all of these slaves were crucified on each side of the highway going like all the way toward Rome.
Crassus did this because he was a little mad. Pompey, the guy that Chris was just talking about, that was another war hero that's going to play a huge part in this story. It swept in. He had killed 5,000 of this slave revolt and then fucks off back to Rome. And he's like, hey, into the slave revolt. And Crassus is like, I've been fighting this shit the whole entire time.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to try to take credit for it, I'm going to do something to prove that Crassus' forces are much stronger than Pompey's forces. We're going to crucify 6,000 people along this road. Now, what do you do? Like,
you killed 5,000. I crucified 6,000.
Yeah.
You obviously left, like, how did I get, like, you left the bulk of the forces.
Mm-hmm. But you think about it, how do you get 6,000 people? Just one a day, you go out there and cut them down off of the crucifix and pull it down? Like, how long are those guys up there? Are they just skeletons up there eventually?
Mm-hmm.
The birds and everything have just pecked them away, and it's just skeletons up on these crosses?
The whole thing is done as a warning because traveling down this road, you're traveling with these slaves that are being brought in to be, you know, sold and everything.
Yeah.
And this is to serve as an example. You're not going to serve that and just be like, yeah, we're only going to do this. We're only leaving the billboard up for a year. They stayed up as long as they could stay up, I'm guessing. And then even after the bodies were gone, they left the crucifixes up because then walking by them, they were like, what's that? And it's like, that's where you'll end up if you ever try to fuck around and do anything.
Deal. Not going to happen. So, yeah, after this ends up happening, this revolt, 70 BCE, in order to award Pompey for coming back and talking shit about the 5,000 and Crassus for the 6,000, they're both elected consuls. Mm-hmm. And they would soon after their consulship find out that they didn't get enough shit passed and they needed another run with somebody also that was very important in power. And Pompey was a legitimate badass. Pompey went through and cleared a lot of stuff in the East, and he made a lot of money.
Crassus was the richest man in Rome, though.
Crassus had maybe the greatest racket that I've ever heard of. That's just the most disgusting thing ever. Crassus owned the only fire department in Rome.
Yeah. Yeah, and he would, okay, so you're thinking, oh, it's a private fire department, so someone would there would be a fire, he would show up, and you would think that he would be like, hey, I have a fire department, hand over some gold, and I'll have my guys put out the fire. No. What he would do is he would show up, the house would be burning, and he's like, where's the homeowner? And they're like, right here. I know I don't have to talk to you. He would go to all the other houses around it because, again, these are close wooden structures. There's not a actual government-sponsored fire department. He would go around to these other houses and be like, hey, do you know your neighbor's house is on fire, which means your house is about to be on fire? I'll buy it from you and give you some money because it's going to be worth nothing if it burns down. And he would buy up these properties. They would burn down. Or no, they wouldn't burn down. He wouldn't let them. As soon as the money was handed over, he would call in his own fire department to put out the fire.
They were on a sliding scale. He would show up. If the house was on fire, they'd be like, oh, thank God, the fire department's here. He'd go, okay. I will give you 50 talents for your house. Like, no, I want to keep the house. That's why I want you to save it.
How many talents to put out the fire?
It would burn down a little bit further. He would go, okay, I will give you 40 talents for your house. They're like, no, we don't want to give up the house.
You're not getting this.
Eventually, as it burns further and further down, he's offering them less and less money. So if he can...
I'm starting to think that you're not here to save the house.
Yeah. It's just the craziest racket to be able to pull off, but he pulls it off to the tune of being the richest man in Rome. Mm-hmm. So he's making a whole hell of a lot of money.
And political influence through paying and everything is kind of the name of the game.
Yeah.
You're able to do favors for people, so that allows him a lot of power, but he also has that military prestige at this point.
And 69 right after this is a real down year for Caesar. Aunt Julia ends up dying. The mother, or I guess the aunt that brought him Gladius? Mm-hmm. Gaius.
Marius.
The aunt that brought him Marius, along with his wife Cornelia. Now,
I think you put too much emphasis on the fact that his aunt died, and you're like, and his wife Cornelia. I think we should probably start. I understand that, but his wife Cornelia dies in childbirth, giving birth to Julia.
Shocking.
Essentially his only legitimate child. And then his aunt dies.
Well, I'll put some pressure, or I'll put some emphasis on Julia, because when apparently in Roman funerals, when you go up to give, I guess, basically the eulogy, like the life story, anything that had been taken away as far as like previous legend or anything like that. So all of Gaius's statues and everything like that, as soon as Sulla got into power, he yanked everything that was attached to Gaius.
Yeah.
Now that he has this funeral that can't be interrupted, he starts bringing up Gaius's accomplishments again and starts trying to reach out to the people that might still be pro-Gaius.
He basically does a PowerPoint presentation. He's like, remember this? And just goes through like pictures, and it's to fucking Melissa Etheridge song, I will remember. And it's just a bunch of guys. And then there's a picture at the end of Julia or the aunt or something like that. And everyone's like, the fuck was that? But do you remember Marius?
Yeah, and he kind of does the same thing with Cornelia, talking more about his family than her family, but also at the same time bringing up Cinna because he was a pro-Marius guy as well.
He's trying to test the waters to see if he still has any support, and almost like as a reminder to be like, hey, remember, I'm related. I'm kind of from those two guys. So any of you that liked what they did or anything, I'm your guy. It's a PR stunt is basically what it is.
Well, now that he's a single man again, you got to go out and find yourself a new wife, right?
Well, I mean, in 69 BC, he gets sent somewhere, so it's not going to be really find a wife at that point. But he gets sent to the south of Spain. There's like two sections that they have as territories. He gets one of them.
Far Spain.
Yep. And by getting that seat, he's not sent there as the governor. He's sent there essentially in another role to like assist the governor, but it's high enough that by getting elected to that seat, he gets a lifetime Senate seat. So he's earned that. So now he's going to be a fixture actually in the Senate.
He has a crisis of life while he's in Spain over there, doesn't he? When he runs upon Alexander's statue.
Oh, yeah. And when he saw it, he wept.
Yeah, apparently they said that he might have been, got to figure out the right word for this, epileptic. He might have had some fits. He was said to have worked himself up in such a shoot that he had a fit, saying at this point in Alexander's life, he had led half of the known world or whatever, and I am older than he is. What have I done with my life?
He's like 40 at this point.
Yeah. Well, and 40 is another important age because once you hit 40, you are allowed to run for consul.
Yes.
So he has that tie-in.
Well, he doesn't, like you said, doesn't stay single for too long because this man is an insane opportunist. So he's looking around. He just had the funeral, and he reminded everybody in that he has these ties to both Marius and to Cinna. But he now has to try to be like, how do I win over the other people that were like all pro Sulla? I'll just fucking marry his granddaughter Pompeia. So he ends up then tying himself into that lineage as well. So now people can't be like, well, you're not pro, you're anti-Sulla. He's like, I married his granddaughter. How could I be anti-Sulla?
Tapping that over there. That's Sulla property.
Honey, who was your grandfather? Sulla! See? So anything before 65?
Nope.
Okay, so 65 BC rolls around, and JC serves as essentially, it's the Roman version of the head of the party planning committee, who also looks after like public building upkeep and everything. He's in charge of festivals and shit.
The curule Adil.
And in this, he excels because he gains support throwing all of these lavish festivals, making sure like the buildings are all looking, top notch, and uses this opportunity to then also plant that seed. He restores Marius's victory trophies. Mm-hmm. So, and these aren't just like, hey, there's a trophy case in the Senate and they're behind glass. These are like the statues commemorating the victory and things like that. So he has these things rebuilt and restores them to where all of a sudden now people have these visual reminders about the good old days. And who did that? Oh, Caesar did that? Oh yeah, remember he was related to Gaius.
Gaius Marius's nephew, yeah. Along with that too, one of the things that he did that it's kind of a tie-in to later on in history, but apparently he fixed all the roads. He made travel very, very easy. And
the trains ran on time.
But much like that, the carriages were running on time back then. So maybe that plays a little further in, and we'll talk about another tie-in to a Mussolini fascisti type deal coming up.
Bathroom break.
Okay.
Well, hey there, all you sexy historians. How you guys doing?
It is time for
Socials.
Where can they find us on Instagram?
If they want to follow us, they can find us at Historically High Pod on Instagram.
That goes the same for Threads as well. You can also find us on Twitter.
Ooh, tell them about Twitter.
Historically High. That's Historically HI on Twitter.
And if you want to email any of your comments or suggestions, where can they find us at, Adam?
At Historically High Podcast at gmail.com.
Gmail. All right, and back to the show. All right. Something interesting happens in 63 BC because JC wins the Pontifex Maximus, which is the highest state religious official. If they had a state pope or cardinal or something like that, it kind of sounds like that's what it is.
Yeah, you're basically running like the religious school.
He runs against two guys who are also probably much more pious or, in that direction than he is. Mm-hmm. So this is definitely a situation where, because this is an elected role and everything, you got to look at Crassus or Pompey and be like, you paid off some people to get him in that role because that just makes him look better and it makes him able to go ahead and help you with your shit if it requires the Pontificus Maximus or whatever it is for their seal of approval or something.
Well, just to point out how important going into debt to win these things was, the day that he leaves to go for the election of the Pontificus Maximus, the maximum pontiff that you can be.
Max Pontiff.
He tells his mom, either I'm going to come back a winner or I'm not coming back. So
don't wait up.
If I lose this money, I'm in debt so far up to my eyeballs that I have to leave Rome. Or else
only the gods can get me out of this debt. So he also wins gets put into the role of praetor. So again, that's commander of legions. He can administer justice. So he's kind of putting additional feathers in his cap. He's checking off the boxes.
Yeah, and that same year, he's kind of covering both angles. He's covering a religious angle and he's covering a political angle. And of course, more bribery happens. There's more ballot stuffing at the boxes throughout this whole entire time. The Roman voting system seems like it's the most corrupt thing ever. When you have Crassus, somebody who assumes all of Caesar's previous debts.
Yeah.
Now he's indebted to Crassus, and it's almost worse to be indebted to these people because no matter what, you'll always owe them a favor, and it might not be financial.
Well, it's going to come back into play.
Oh, yeah.
But he's got this guy, his name is Catullus, and he was the guy he beat out, one of the guys he beat out for the Max Pontiff. This guy ends up turning around and being like, this is obviously like someone was bribed. There's some collusion here. This thing fucking stinks. He ends up trying to get Caesar fired and like damage his reputation. Doesn't end up working, but he's, made another enemy. After his praetor, promotion or whatever, he's actually sent to govern that southern portion of Spain that he was kind of serving under the other governor with. And this basically allows him to pay off some of that debt.
Yeah.
Because being away from the empire and being out in one of these, territories that's closer to essentially territory you don't own, you can then raise soldiers and go out there and start bringing in money, paying a little bit of it back to Rome. But this is how he's going to he's going to war to pay his debt is basically what this role means. So he's like, yeah, I guess I'll take it.
The Iberian Peninsula had some nasty Gauls on it.
Yeah.
These guys were very guerrilla in their tactics. There were so many tribes that you were just fighting against somebody all the time. You could beat them back into an area and then a new tribe would show up. I think Caesar did a pretty good job at doing this because he actually beat most of the Gauls in the southern portion of Spain and the Iberian Peninsula all the way into what is modern-day Portugal. So he had them cornered in like the bottom tip of Spain.
He ends up capturing one of the tribes, and when we say tribes, these are like large collections of people. It's not like just a few hundred.
Yeah,
they call them tribes in the research, and so that's kind of what the terminology we're using is. But he ends up capturing the capital of one of these, groups of people and makes a shit ton of money. Pays off pretty much all of his debts. He's able to pay all these soldiers. He's able to then use that money to raise more legions. So he has more guys, so he's able to conquer more area. Well, in 60 BC, all of a sudden, Rome comes knocking.
And he's 40.
And he gets a messenger or message, and they're basically like, here's the deal. You got two choices. You've been doing a lot of good things. You can either come back, you can keep doing what you're doing, keep your army. You can have a triumph, so we will celebrate the shit out of you. You've been wanting one of these. We know how hard you're jonesing for one. Or you can give that all up for a shot at being the consul. We're not giving you the consulship. We're telling you that you can be eligible for election and you can run for it. And he's like, I want that fucking seat.
You got to be back in person, which means you have to.
He's like, can I do it by absentia or proxy? And they're like, no.
You got to come back.
It's the fucking presidency.
You think you're your uncle? You think you've done enough to.
Hold on. So you want to run for it, but keep your troops. So if you don't win it, you still have your
This feels like a bad choice to make.
Yeah.
And the dates were set up, it had to have been intentionally, where his triumph was actually scheduled after the date that was the cutoff to
so
come back
get the
and
triumph
put
and
your
be
name
like, I'm not
in.
doing consul.
Exactly. Yeah. So he ends up going ahead and dropping his legions, dropping his troops, and he comes back to try to run for consul.
There's just at the bottom, it's like, P.S., remember the boundary.
Remember the Rubicon.
Remember the Rubicon. So he has a ton of support. He's got a ton of support from people that are just like reading about his areas that he's conquering. It's for the glory of Rome. Never a bad thing. He also has Pompey. He also has Crassus. So he has people that are still kind of singing his praises and keeping himself relevant back in Rome. And because of this, he ends up winning it.
Yeah, and all three of them sort of need each other. So Crassus and Pompey are both on another level. They need somebody to come in and become a consul because they have to get some of this legislation passed. If they can put kind of a puppet consul in Caesar, which is funny how this all comes about, then they'll have the control to be able to force the legislation to continue to make themselves even more rich.
Correct.
Crassus obviously has the debt still of Caesar. Pompey needs to be joined into this threesome, and the way that he does that is, I believe Pompey is 6 years older than Caesar. Caesar marries his only daughter, Julia, to Pompey.
So 47, Pompey, 17, Julius. So
It's a lot. Big difference.
Yeah, it's a big one.
Apparently they loved each other, though. Apparently this was a great match. I think Pompey had been married 2 other times, and this is obviously Julia's first time, but they got along very, very well.
Are you saying that was sarcasm?
No. Historically, I forgot what I was listening to, but the guy's like, this is why historians hate love, because it makes no sense. And it can be disgusting, really, at any age.
Well, she never wanted for anything.
Yeah.
So with getting that spot, usually you'd want to get somebody else that's also on your team in that other consul spot. Well, bad luck for Caesar because someone from the rival party actually gets that other consul spot, a guy named Marcus Biblius.
Hilarious name.
And he is already like an established rival with Caesar. So
Biblius is one of Cato's boys.
Yep.
And Cato Jr. had a lot of different issues with Caesar. There were points in time where he had pointed at Caesar for different conspiracies. There was a point in time in the Senate where he was berating Caesar for being in on one of these conspiracies. Caesar gets handed a note from a page in the Senate, and immediately Cato jumps on it. He goes, see, he's into the conspiracy. That's a note from a conspirator
he's
right
passing
there.
notes. He's passing notes.
Yeah, exactly. He was the nerd in the class that was pointing it out. And he goes, bring that note forward so we can see your conspiratorial actions. And Caesar kind of gets a smile on his face, and he goes, okay. And he hands it up, and it gets all the way up to the front, and it gets to Cato. Cato opens it up and starts reading off of the note. It was a note from Cato's stepsister. I forgot her name. And it was basically like a sext. It was just, I want to do this to you later and this to you. We're going to cover each other in olive oil and just slip and slide on each other for hours and hours.
Read it out loud.
Cato just made that proclamation, and now he had to read it in front of the entire Senate. And this goes back to just how much of a poonhound Julius was. Cato's little sister ends up becoming
lock up your wives, lock up your daughters. He's fucking everything.
Cato's sister is like his main side piece, and Cato's sister will give birth to somebody that we talk about a little bit later that may have been contributed to Caesar, but when you do the math, Caesar was just too young at this point to have born a child. Mm-hmm. But it comes back to bite him pretty quickly.
Yeah. Well, being at a disadvantage kind of in the consulship position, you're going to need to find a way to do it in other ways.
Yeah.
So we come to what's known as the first triumvirate. And this is Julius Caesar, Marcus Crassus, and Pompey was his first name. I can't remember what his last name was.
It didn't. Pompey was
the
best
what
name,
it was.
Yeah.
So these three basically make an agreement and are like, hey, we're going to back each other on all of this. Caesar's consul. We helped you out when we were both consul. The three of us with all of our influence, we can definitely get whatever we need to get done, push through. So we're going to try to kind of align some of our needs. Crassus and Pompey weren't super cool with each other. Caesar kind of had to broker the deal. What does this remind me of when someone had to sit down and broker a deal? We did another episode where there was something very, very similar to this, where a middleman had to step in.
Yeah, it eludes me. I just immediately think allies in World War II, but
probably something like that. Anyway, the deal is they're going to do some land type bill that's going to benefit both of them, and they're making money and all that kind of shit because that's what it's all about.
Yeah, Pompey basically wanted all of his old soldiers to be given land grants. He wanted them to be fulfilled with basically everything that he had promised them while they were over there fighting.
So
now
they'll
that
fight
they're
for
done.
him again.
Yeah, exactly. So he wanted to get that pushed through. Crassus again is trying to get these land bills pushed through because he's
wants the same type of shit.
Yeah, he's a magnate. And they run into an issue where they look at Caesar like, hey, Biblius is over there. Cato put him in power. Cato doesn't like you, so clearly he put Biblius in there to try to thwart what we're doing. Mm-hmm. Caesar just looks at both of them. He's like, that's fine. I can steamroll Biblius immediately. And he pretty much does. When they're sitting in consul together in the Senate for debates or anything like that, basically anytime Biblius starts talking, Caesar starts talking over him. He bullied Biblius to the point to where they actually poured a bucket of shit on him in the Senate that Caesar had arranged. Yeah.
All covered in shit.
They had pushed Biblius so far back that he wouldn't leave his house, but he had this brilliant strategy. Because there was a rule in Rome that no laws could be passed and the Senate could not be brought together if there was a lightning strike in the day, because the gods would be angry that day.
Or something that you can make up, or you heard thunder in the distance, or you had a guy holding a sheet of metal that was trying to make thunder sounds.
So every day Biblius would go out on his balcony.
Is that rain?
Yeah. Clear day. It could be 95 degrees and there's not a cloud in the sky. And he'd say, saw a bolt of lightning. Can't do anything today.
Sorry, guys. Shop's closed.
Yeah.
So with this, there's some stuff there's some tomfoolery going on in the Senate, and this stuff does get out to the public. So in other ways, Julius Caesar has to do these other things that basically kind of ingratiate him. One of the things he does is he's like, listen up, everyone. I'm actually going to publish everything that goes on in the Senate, and we're going to make it accessible to the public. We're going full transparency. So all the nasty shit I know that all you guys are going to do, it's all going to come out. The three of us on the triumvirate, don't worry about us. We're going to be, we're doing what's best in the public interest. That also gives you access to possibly posting stuff that's not true. And then what's going to happen? Well, I read that. Are you going to issue a retraction? It's so hard to, once the information is out there, cat's out of the bag, not too easy to get back in the bag.
Caesar created C-SPAN that he could edit himself.
Pretty much. So Pompey's bill is getting held up by Cato, like you were saying. Biblius basically is kind of in Cato's pocket, so he's like, you're going to shoot this thing down. And does this thing where apparently the public becomes aware that because he's trying to just simply stonewall this without putting it to a vote or anything, the public is like, that's actually a violation of our rights to have that type of representation. And it starts a fucking chain reaction that results in a full-blown riot to where the guys that were allowed to, was it the praetors or the tribunes, were able to hold, going back to the Mussolini episode, like you were saying, these things that are called fasces. And the fascie was basically a bundle of sticks or wood with an axe head at the top, right?
Yeah, fascie, bundle of sticks.
Yeah, exactly. So apparently these things were getting taken away from the loyal Tribune people that were on Cato's side, and people are breaking them in the streets, which is like this huge sign of disrespect. Like, they've lost faith in you. We want you out of office, all this stuff. So a huge affront, apparently. And because of this, basically all this negative perception on Cato and Biblius, Caesar's able to kind of push the bill through and get it voted through. Crassus also gets a couple of his bills through, so it's coming up aces for the first triumvirate.
Hell yeah.
But because of some of the stuff they're pulling kind of behind the scenes and in the Senate, the act starts to wear a little bit thin on people because they kind of see what's going on behind the scenes and sees how they're kind of manipulating things.
A lot of corruption going on. A lot of people being paid off to agree to some of these bills. I'm sure eventually when they find out the kind of stuff that Caesar was pulling on Biblius, they weren't pumped, and then Biblius became a shithead, so they were probably okay with it. But at the same time, you have people in the Senate that are pro-Biblius that are seeing this happen. And
the guy got a bucket of shit dumped on him.
Yeah.
It's just consul hazing.
And once you're out of that consulship, you can be charged with crimes.
That's why you have to set yourself up to move right into another position, and that's exactly what Caesar does. They end up passing this thing called the Lex Vatinius, which is basically the proclamation that Caesar is going to govern Cisalpine Gaul, which is the top portion of Italy where it actually joins the land. The way I described it, remember, it's where the crabs would live.
Yeah,
the
root of the penis.
Exactly. And then this place called Illyrium, which is northwest of like Greece. It's the area kind of, the Aegean is what's in Greece. Is it the Caspian? Not the Caspian. What's the one that's right there between Italy and Greece? Oh my God, I don't know how I don't know this. Anyway, it's the country that is that northern portion right there. So he would govern both of those places. He's appointed to that position. Consul ends. He moves right into that to where he can't be pulled up on charges or anything like that.
5 years. He gets a 5-year stay, basically, from being prosecuted. Comes up pretty lucky because the governor that was headed to Transalpine Gaul, which would be the part of France that's above the Alps, ends up dying on that trip. So if there's no governor, he's in Cisalpine Gaul. It's just the Alps in between. I mean, fucking Hannibal crossed it with elephants. We can definitely get through the Alps to get up there if we need to.
The last time I was governor, I got filthy fucking rich. Yeah. I got all this glory. It actually kind of propelled me into the consulship. Imagine what I can do with 5 years and all of this area and all this money I now have to, win further glory and further advance myself.
Well, not to mention, I'm governor of Cisalpine Gaul, so this is all everything that's under our control. There's a bunch of stuff north of Transalpine Gaul that if I go and get for us, I get first dibs on anything up there.
And then also, like, not pretty far, but more westernly, that's where Gaul is. And so that's kind of where he ends up moving into because, 58 BC, of course there's instability in Gaul from the Roman perspective. And so Gaul and Cisalpine Gaul are basically his area to just make sure he is kind of cleaning up the messes, securing that. And as he secures those areas, he's just moving further and further. This is where we get to the Gallic Wars.
Yeah, and they start off kind of sillily enough. There was a group of tribesmen that were coming from the east. They were getting pushed on by the Germanic peoples that were coming in there. They had had enough of it. They wanted to go ahead and cross over, go towards the west. To go towards the west, they had to cross through Transalpine Gaul.
Was it the Helvetii?
Yes.
Yes, yeah.
And so Caesar sees these people traveling through Roman land, and you can't have that.
Well, they asked him. They had approached him and been like, hey, or sent emissaries or whatever. They're like, we're trying to move a shit ton of people. It's like 250,000 people.
Tons of people, yeah.
And yeah, we've been forced from our homes by the Germans, we know how that goes and everything. Yeah, they've been causing us some issues too. But we're trying to move over to this other area and we just want to travel through your territory. And he's like, no. And he's like, we actually burned all of our stuff so no one could go back. So everyone had to commit to this. So there's not really a place for us to go back to. He's like, sorry.
Sucks.
Yeah, I don't know what to tell you. So they end up leaving and start like heading in another direction. I think they're going to go
north.
To the other side.
They're going north around Transalpine Gaul.
And he waits till they get all the way past him, raises a bunch of legions, and then basically attacks them in the rear at what's known as the Battle of, is it Bibracte or Bibracte? Bibracte?
That sounds close to
But
right. Go with right.
yeah, so it was the Helvetii were, again, you could also consider them like this Germanic, is it Suebi?
I don't know.
It's
Suebi?
S-U-E-B-I. E-B-I. S-U-E-B-I.
Yeah.
But you get this group that's also Germanic under this king called King Ariovistus. And it's basically, he hasn't really fought these people a lot before. He doesn't know what they're capable of. And so the fight's a little bit more than he thought it was going to be. It looks like he's actually on the verge of losing until this guy named, is it Publius or Publius? It's Publius, right?
Publius isn't the fun way.
With pube.
Publius sounds
Publius
better.
Crassus, which is the son of Marcus Crassus, does this cavalry charge from like the left flank and ends up, routing the forces, and they end up winning. They end up killing 120,000 of these guys.
So just to kind of point this stuff out, Caesar becomes his own scribe when he goes north into Cisalpine Gaul. He writes what would come known as the Gallic commentaries that he wrote himself. He wrote them in a way to where kind of the only thing that he would punch up would be the numbers of adversaries and the numbers of kills.
Yeah.
Because he knew that had he tried to punch everything up, there was a bunch of witnesses there that could counteract these statements, that could go against what he said. One of the very brilliant things that he did was he wrote most of this in the third person.
So it seemed like there was a scribe with him, an impartial scribe, that was actually another set of eyes taking down these numbers.
So this is solely Caesar writing this, but everything that gets back seems like it's coming from somebody who wasn't Caesar, that was just pointing out all of these great things that he did.
Which also meant he had to refer to himself during this entire portion in the third person.
Brian, this is Deion Sanders talking about his great day on defense.
Going back to that battle, the one of Bibracte, that was different from essentially the battle he did against the Germanic Suebi. I don't know how I got those confused, but the big thing from that Helvetii migration is he ends up wiping out like all of them, like the women and the children. Like that's stuff that I don't think is probably included in that commentary. He's just sending back numbers because it's going to end up like he eventually can get brought up on stuff.
Yeah.
And causing a genocide is something that people back in Rome, regardless if they give a fuck about the genocide, are going to be like, we can use this against him.
I think less about, hey man, bad deal, you committed genocide, more like you could have brought back more slaves.
Yeah, okay. And that's fucking disgusting,
yeah.
But that's absolutely probably accurate.
Instead of killing all of them, we could have used some extra hands about town. Maybe you could have killed half of them and brought the rest of them back?
Yeah, so in 58, he takes out this fucking just migrating people trying to get the fuck out of danger, and then ends up taking out this king Ariovistus. But it wasn't past the Rhine. They were on the Gallic side, essentially, of the Rhine. That's going to come later. At this point, he's like, I am tuckered out. I got a pile of paperwork back in Cisalpine Gaul. I got to do some governor shit. The campaign season, it's over. We're going to go ahead and head back. And he goes back to, I think he heads back just to Transalpine Gaul because it's closer.
Cisalpine Gaul is the bottom one.
It is. So I think
Cis.
he head back to Cis.
Yeah.
And just basically does admin work. Yeah. He's like, all right, let me see what the taxes for this land are. Let me see how much money I made during this time frame. All of the loot and everything, I've sent it back. And then also let me make sure my commentary that I just wrote gets back to Rome and gets copied down.
Tighten this up a little bit before I send it off.
Exactly. Because if he waits till his entire campaign and all this stuff is over, the 5 years that he's supposed to send, people are going to read these and being like, oh, great, and everything. But so much is going to happen in that time frame. He basically makes a fucking Julius Caesar newsletter that he is sending back and having this information disseminated about all of these things. So where people are constantly talking about Julius Caesar.
Well, and a big part of it too, why he's having so much success, there's way more Gallic people than he has in his legions, but they're all broken up into different tribes. There's no unity and community in between these different tribes of these Gallic people. And he takes advantage of that because there are Gallic tribes in the north in Transalpine Gaul who run into problems with other Gallic tribes. He would use that as an advance to move further north to help out a supposed friend and ally. And after he gets up there and wipes out the Gallic tribe that he had trouble with, he just ends up claiming that land for Rome too and bring those people under servitude. So say you go up, you kill the force that's invading, and then once you've killed all of them, you enslave the people that called you to come up there to be sent back to Rome.
Hey, thanks for the information. Put on these chains if you would.
Yeah, and it's just kind of one step further north. And he has this system where during raiding season, he goes out, he moves up further north. As soon as the winter hits, he transitions back down to Cisalpine Gaul. He has a little party. He writes all of his buddies. While this is happening, Crassus and
Pompey.
God damn it, I almost said Vesuvius. Pompey go up and they meet him in Cisalpine Gaul, and they're keeping him abreast of what's going on in Rome. They're telling him what's going on in the Senate. They're saying, hey, everybody loved your shit. We got your last manuscript. It looks awesome. You're getting a lot of people. There's going to be triumphs and tributes coming your way. This is going to happen. Oh, yeah. And we've actually gained ground on this legislation in the Senate as we're still down there working, to the point to where I believe both of them end up being reelected as consuls, and they actually extend out for another 5 years his protection.
That'll come up here. I'm not sure if they're consuls or if they're just have that much influence that they're able to push it through. In 57 BC, the Gauls kind of sense something's up. There have probably been some survivors of these fucking attacks and everything. Word's gotten around, and they're like, so he was kind of over in this direction. He finished that stuff off. What other direction is he going to start heading? Right toward us. So the buildup of these Gallic tribes starts to happen, and they're able to kind of unite under a front of being like, hey, who doesn't like Caesar? Who doesn't like Rome? And everyone's like, we don't like Rome. And everyone's like, oh, wait, we're all fighting together.
Doesn't this happen later? Because he still hasn't gone up he hasn't gone into Germany yet.
He hasn't gone up in Germany yet. The Gauls are at France.
Yeah, but he comes back and he, Severix or whatever his name is.
That's still to come.
But isn't that when they unite?
No. This happens a couple different times.
Okay.
So Caesar ends up gathering, I think, between like 32 and 40,000 troops, broken up into his legions. And then the Gallic tribes that have united at this point are, according to him, number about 200,000. So he's got to set himself way back so, the victories are that much sweeter.
There's also no way that there's 200,000 Gallic tribes up there together.
Yeah.
That's a lot of people.
So one of these tribes is called the Belgae, and they're kind of in modern-day Belgium. So he's heading up pretty far. I mean, he's heading up all the way kind of toward the coast and everything.
Yeah, he wants some waffles.
Now, also, when this gathering of Gallic tribes, that doesn't mean that he's getting into conflict with them during this year. They're just starting to kind of sense the writing on the wall and starting to build up their strength. So this Belgae tribe that he meets up in Belgium, he meets them at this place called, the two armies end up meeting at this place called Bibrax. They end up avoiding fighting because the Belgae see them start to dig in and build the fortifications. And Roman fortifications are insane. So their engineering is down to such a precise science that they will roll up into a place and start constructing a fort like immediately. They'll be able to raise fences. They will dig an cavalry moat around it and then put all the sticks, the ones that point outward, all along the outside. They lay the camp out in the same way all the time. It's got watchtowers and everything. You can look up some images of like reconstructions that have been done. This happens every time they go to set up shop somewhere. It's not like they have to like tear it down or anything, because if they need to fall back, they want someplace, but they're constructing this every time. And it's not is it a nightly thing every time they set up camp, right?
I would assume if they're going to dig in and fortify an area, it becomes much more elaborate.
Yeah, that's probably true. But they're basically able to start construction on this. The Belgae see it and they're just like, nah, we're good. And they just end up leaving. So they let him get done with some of the work. And then they're just like, yeah, we're not setting up here.
You would think that they would probably try to bring the fortifications with them, right? Because to go down and cut down that much wood every single time you
would
needed
bring
to make
some
one.
of what you could. You're not going to allow it to slow yourself down. I also think there were circumstances where it wasn't like you were traveling every day.
Yeah.
You would get there, you would get to a location. Hey, this is good. Let's go ahead and spread out from this, send out scouting parties. Let's set up shop here for the week.
We're going to talk about their bridge building soon, and
Yeah.
I don't understand where they got all the resources from. Like, they had to have leveled a forest.
Oh, yeah. So they see them start to leave, and they're like, hold on a second. We can actually travel faster than they actually can. They kind of split up a little bit. We're going to go ahead and race one of the groups home, and we're going to actually catch them. We're going to take their capital before they even get there. So the Romans race them home and basically begin this siege of this capital of this like specific tribe. And they're able to, under the cover of night, sneak a whole bunch of like the entire army of the Belgae. They're able to sneak back into the capital to try to defend from this siege. But during this time frame, a couple of these other tribes that are kind of in a surrounding area, they're like, yeah, you guys are bringing some fucking smoke. Like we can't stand up to this. So we're going to go ahead and surrender. After they surrender, you basically get this thing called the Battle of the Sabis.
Yeah, in 57, Sabis. A big part of this is, again, even when they're uniting, eventually you can scare off any other outer tribes. So if you're looking for reinforcement or anything like that, it kind of falls by the wayside. And you have early, would you call them siege machines that they're building?
Yeah.
Basically.
They know what they're doing, man. They've conquered how many different, they can siege. It's siege and then projectile launchers, because a lot of these places, it's not medieval big stone block construction. Some of these places have, formidable defenses, but you hit it with a bunch of rocks launched out of a fucking catapult a bunch of times, it's going to knock a hole in the wall.
Yeah, and that's really all you need. If you can bust down the wood wall, you're pretty much inside. If you can burn a wood wall, you're pretty much inside. Like, there's definitely ways where they waged battle during the Battle of Sabis that it was just, they were so technologically advanced above these Gauls that they just didn't ever stand a chance.
And because of that, they already kind of were trying to adapt their tactics, because they're like, listen, we've been under siege, on this. We need to figure out a new way to do it. And so they basically try to kind of do an ambush while they're setting up camp. They got to wait till they're the most vulnerable. And this was a situation, I don't know if it was an experience or just overconfidence, but this was something that like Caesar was very close to losing, because he had sent out his guys to start doing like all the engineering work on the outside, but didn't send them out with like proper protection. And so as these tribes come in to start attack them, he's got some of his legions that haven't even caught up yet, because the first guys that get there are going to be the ones that start setting everything up, and basically has to be rescued by these two legions that were kind of coming in from the back that kind of turned the tide.
And he wasn't scoring perfect marks every single time. There were battles that they would lose to the Gallic people. And one thing that kind of drew criticism from these manuscripts, I guess you could call them, these diaries that he's writing down, is he did kind of the cardinal sin of Roman record keeping. And that's mentioning your losses. And the people back home didn't like hearing that, because a Roman defeat at the hands of these primitive barbarian
but he always
Gauls.
downplayed them.
Yeah.
I think he was of the mind of knowing, if I just don't report any losses at all, then something is going to sound like it's up, because it can't be successful all the time. But if I make my losses so minuscule and just make it sound like, what happened? I sent out a foraging party or something and they got attacked, when in actuality, like a legion got wiped out or like half of it got wiped out. You can try to spin that to make it still believable, but to hide the fact of like what the severity of it is.
Well, just like we talked about before, he didn't usually write anything that could be directly pushed back on by somebody else that was there.
And maybe it was even circumstances where he's like, well, that legion wasn't actually under my direct command. It was under this guy's command. But at the same time, you got to be careful who you're throwing on the bus, because he does have like Crassus's kid. And then he has Some of his other guys have political connections or serving on the Senate as well, just not at as high of a level as he is. He decides at this point, he's like, okay, what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go over, head toward the Atlantic coast and start cleaning up some stragglers, maybe take out some smaller kind of pocketed different tribes here. And then after that, I'll go ahead and head back for the winter. I'll be able to do some more paperwork, get everything done in Transalpine and Cisalpine Gaul, handle all the civic business. Due to what he is able to do just along the Atlantic coast, one of the tribes, he sells 53,000 members of them into slavery. 53 fucking thousand, which means that all of the money made off selling those people goes to him, pays his troops, sends a little bit of it back to Rome, but the majority of it is his. The Senate grants a 15-day, the public prayer Thanksgiving thing for his victories that are happening. I'm sure they're, the prayers are just reading fucking passages out of his commentary books or whatever it is. And as he kind of moves himself back from, the northern area of Gaul, he's like, I'm going to go and have my troops winter here. Not only can I don't want to have to come and try to even redo any of this stuff by you guys gathering back up during the winter. So I'm going to leave them here. But also this is a form of punishment because you're going to support them. You're going to feed them and you're going to house them, or at least, to a degree. But this is, kind of a punishment of letting these people know, be like, oh no, like this is what's going to be happening from now on.
It's a wild risk to take just based upon how much you've done to these people that you're entrusting them to be able to not try to kill everybody.
You've killed a shit ton of them and you're leaving legions up there, 5,000 to 6,000, of these groups. They're also consuming the resources that you can then use, that you would normally use if you were going to try to build up an army or anything like that. So it's keeping them passive in so many different ways. 56 rolls around. Do you have anything left from 57?
No.
56 rolls around, and this begins this campaign called the Veneti campaign. And this is kind of a change of pace from how Caesar's used to fighting, because the Veneti are this group of people that live on the coast. He didn't make
people,
it,
aren't they?
Huh?
Boat people.
Yeah. So they're like a naval people. They have most of their power is done through naval strength, but they are used to sailing around the Atlantic Ocean, which is much different from the Mediterranean. You can have ships that aren't as strong, that are different shaped, that are just good for getting around the Mediterranean, but to take them out in the Atlantic where the waves are more severe and everything like that, they don't really function. So you're already at a disadvantage there.
Deep-holed vessels, you would say.
So Caesar spreads his forces. He basically, not all going after this area kind of over on the Atlantic coast. He spreads them out because he doesn't want this campaign to draw attention and have all these little other areas building up troops. So he splits up some of his legions, sends them out under commanders, and starts to gather his naval forces. Weather's not really on their side, so they have to delay it for a little bit. But then in the summer, it kind of turns a little bit, and he's able to launch this main campaign that leads to this big decisive battle, which is the Battle of Morbihan. And this is a full-on ship-to-ship battle. You have these Veneti ships who are much more, tailored to fight in the Atlantic. They use sails over, the rowing and the oars and everything like that the Roman ships used.
We're talking about just archers, right? Is their main form of weaponry?
From ship to ship.
Yeah.
So this is where the tactics of the Romans come into play. The Veneti are probably trying to stay further away and using the sails and everything to kind of outmaneuver them. They're able to move a lot faster. The tactic that the Romans actually use is they get close enough to where they're able to launch grappling hooks up into the sails of these ships from the Veneti.
Tear them down.
Tear the sails down, and all of a sudden these things aren't built for rowers. They can't move anymore. And so now the Roman ships can get them next to him, pull them in because they've got them grappled, and now they're on their turf with like hand-to-hand fighting.
Okay.
So this tactic completely, changes the course of this battle, and the Romans and Caesar end up having this huge victory. They win the day. After that battle, the Veneti surrender, and Caesar's like, you guys look like you'd make me a lot of money as slaves, and sells off a fuck ton of them as slaves.
The other piece of information that he gets from the Veneti is there are some people to the north that may be coming down from an island that was really marked one time by like a Greek sailor who went up and spotted it.
People had gone up from Rome, they knew of the English Channel.
Mm-hmm.
They knew that there was land up there, but no army had actually ever set foot on Britain.
Enough to the point to where they thought it was across the ocean. Because in some parts of the English Channel, you can't see across. There's the cliffs of Dover where you can, but there's other parts where you just can't see it.
Yeah.
Along that way...
Which is crazy because you know that the Mediterranean is not technically the ocean, and you definitely cannot see across it.
You guys went over to Greece. Like, that wasn't the ocean, but you think that the English Channel is the ocean. Maybe it was just because it was rougher weather and rougher seas. By the end of... right around by the end of 56, they've reached all the way up into Brittany. They've gone so far into France, in northern France, that they're just cleaning out pretty much most of Gaul.
They've gotten to the furthest point north of France. They haven't gone over into Britain yet.
Not yet. Brittany.
Yes. During that 56 campaign as well, kind of going on not the Atlantic coast. So this guy named Sabinus ends up getting attacked, him and his legion, up in Normandy. So they're some of the people up there actually in the north of France.
Pre-Normans.
Yep. And then Crassus Jr. has a kind of much tougher fight against 50,000 of these I think they were Gallic or a mixture of German. I can't remember exactly what it was, but ends up saying he kills 38,000 of them, so only leaves 12,000 alive. And then basically all of these kind of victories together give them control of the majority of, I think it's southwestern Gaul.
That's a pretty big swath of land that he's eaten up.
This is the time when you were right. Pompey and Crassus take consul for 55 BC, and this is when Caesar gets the extension for another 5 years for his governorship of basically Gaul. So at this point, they're like, Cisalpine, Transalpine, it's all fucking Gaul. Caesar, take it.
Yeah. And Caesar decides to celebrate in 55 by stretching his legs a little bit when he takes eyes on the Rhine.
Gonna do what no army, no general, no leader in Rome has done. He's going to cross not one, but two of these non-crossed water sources. The first one is going to start with the Rhine. He also knows that Pompey and Crassus, they have this triumvirate, but again, they're out for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
So he has to also stay on their level. He can't do that in Rome on the political level, but by doing all of these outlandish things that no one else has ever done. If someone's talking about a bill they're trying to pass, but then they're like, did you hear Caesar went across the Rhine? You're going to be like, the fuck? Who gives a shit about your bill? Well, I want to hear more about Caesar. He's got to do these things because the last year, what did Caesar do this year? He's still fighting in Gaul. Hasn't he been doing that for the last 5 years? Well, yeah.
What does he have to show for it?
Yeah, no kidding. He's got to keep upping upping the ante. So he goes over the Rhine. And first he ends up having to fight the Celts near the Rhine, right?
Yes.
Okay.
After he ends up beating them, it blows me away. This engineering, it doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, he gets beat with the first group of Celts because there were 800 of
they lost
cavalry.
The first one?
Yeah, well, it was the first little skirmish. So there were 800 Celtic cavalry that had beat 5,000 Roman Gauls. So this is where we were talking about, I don't know if we were recording at that point. He's not fighting with strictly Roman forces. All these areas that he's taken over, the people that were pacified in Cisalpine, Transalpine, the ones that weren't wiped out, he's like, oh, by the way, you are subjects of Rome. And as subjects of Rome, you're going to need to go ahead and fight for me. So he's also creating these legions out of these areas.
We'll pay you guys.
And we won't kill your families.
What are you going to pay us in? Talents?
Not killing your families?
What the fuck's a talent? You have to think at that point in time, the tribes understood money in exchange, but most of their interactions and trades are just goods.
It's like Roman bucks. It's Caesar bucks. They're basically like, yeah, these talents are good in any Roman city.
Yeah.
Take them back and you can,
We're nowhere near a Roman city. Well, when you go, eventually, if you cross me enough, I'll send you guys down there.
Well, in retaliation for this, them beating these 5,000 Roman Gauls, Caesar is just basically like, nope, we're just going to go ahead and attack their undefended camp and kills everybody.
Kills
And
his own conscripted people, basically.
no, kills the people he would have conscripted. No, he kills everybody in this Gaul Celtic camp, and women, children, everyone. It's bad enough to where it actually finds its way back to Rome. And the guys, of course, on the other side that are looking for anything they can do to kind of, drag him down are talking about war crimes, talking about genocide, all this kind of stuff. Like, was all of this necessary? Like the women and the children and all this. And so people are starting to build a case against him for when this next stint of governor ends, in case there's a lapse in him getting another office.
Unfortunately, they won't get that chance.
Nope, because he's getting ready to cross the Rhine, baby.
Yeah, so you think we're talking pre-Common Era. You're going to build a bridge across the Rhine River. You're going to have to build this somewhere, and these are the numbers that I found. I don't know if you found anything different. Depending on the area of the Rhine, they said it would have been about 140 to 400 meters wide to span this.
So 140 times 3, because a meter is 3 feet almost?
Yeah, so 420 feet or up to 1,300 feet, basically, that he has to cover. The bridge had to have a width, or did have a width, between 7 to 9 meters. So at the max, you're going 27 feet wide.
Gotta get your wagon train over and everything.
Yep. The pylons that they smashed into the ground to hit the riverbed got up to 9.1 meters at certain points. So we're talking almost 30 feet deep. He's finding timbers to jab down into the earth to be able to support this bridge.
So this is why this is so impressive. Usually if he's trying to get across a river, they had developed the process of building pontoon bridges, floating bridges that they can move them across. To build an actual, what could stay as a permanent bridge, the pylons and everything like that, they did it in 10 days.
How? That's what
I'm saying. The engineers are fucking insane, dude.
You would have had to have leveled an entire forest to get that much wood.
Imagine this, too. You're marching with even, let's just say, 3 legions. That's 5,000 apiece, 15,000 guys. You set up shop somewhere and you build a bridge. You have all those guys out, aside from the guys setting up camp, chopping down wood, fucking knocking off branches and getting stuff ready for just the engineers to be like, here, and here's where it's going to go.
Yeah, I wonder, this is maybe bad research on my part. I wonder if they use lashings or if they...
Like a tongue and groove situation?
Yeah, maybe made like a peg system.
I don't know.
Because to make pegs, it's gonna take longer than 10 days to make enough pegs.
Remember how crazy, when Leonardo did the bridge across that area without any locking joints or something like that, and how impressed everyone was?
Yeah.
This is so much further back in the past and on such a much larger scale.
10 days.
And he goes over for only 18. He crosses the Rhine and spends 18 days kind of just fucking around, taking out some tribes, looting and everything like that.
Let's give credit where credit's due. First off, once the Germans see that build this bridge in 10 days, they're like, we're probably not equipped to do this. Let's get the fuck out of there.
We're just going to fuck off now.
So what Caesar does is they go through and sack the villages and the farms and everything so much to where he finally felt enough after 18 days that they caused enough damage to cause a famine later on in the season.
And probably to the point of proving a point of being like, don't cross this.
Yeah.
And to make sure they didn't cross it, as he comes back across, he burns the fucking bridge down.
Hilarious. So in 28 days, he built a bridge, crossed a bridge, caused a famine, burned down the bridge.
Yeah.
That's a pretty quick turnaround.
And he's not done yet for 55 BC because all of a sudden he gets back. He only spent 18 days over there, so he's still got some time to burn.
Yeah, they did this in less than a calendar month.
So I see him coming back across the bridge. He's looking that direction. He's like, where are we going to go now? And he's like, do you guys remember we have control of northern Gaul and there was that other land across there? He's like, yeah, we're going to go attack them. Why are we attacking them? He's like, shit. You know what? I heard a rumor that the Britons were actually supporting the Gauls that we've been fighting against. And I mean, if they're supporting them, they're technically attacking us. So we should go over there and, make sure they don't do that.
Well, what the Vidians, the boat people, Veneti, after they had kind of beaten their asses and got a little intel from them, the Veneti had basically offered up the information that the Britons would come down and trade with them. There were rumors of gold and silver and pearls.
Oh, yeah, he loves pearls, doesn't he?
Yep, pearls were a big thing. His mistress, Brutus's mother, that we're going to talk about sometime soon.
One of his mistresses.
Yeah, his longest-serving mistress is the way that she was described.
That's Cato's sister, right?
Yeah, Cato's sister and Brutus's mother.
Yeah.
He gave her like a black pearl that it was worth like 1.9 million talents at that time or something like that.
I want you to hold this inside you and think of me.
Put this in your clam.
Yeah. We're fucking 8 years old.
Yeah. Well,
okay.
They know by now.
Yeah. All right. So he actually has some ships. He doesn't have enough to get everyone across. He takes over basically just kind of like what you would consider not like a scouting party, but a minimal force. I think maybe like a legion, something like that. And
his first time, I think it was 2 legions.
Okay. So they're heading over. Oh, I forgot 1 legion.
Yeah. Sorry.
So as they're sailing over there, all of a sudden they're getting closer and they see the Britons and they're like waiting for them. They're like, yeah, we heard.
Weren't they headed to the cliffs of Dover? Wasn't that their first attempt?
I think that's the first place they saw because that's the first land they could see. So they knew they could sail toward it. And then, of course, seeing the cliffs, you're like, no, we got to start. But they saw the Britons and they're like, okay, we're just going to start sailing around the coast a little bit and we'll get ahead of them. No, the Britons just turn. It's like the thing where they're just following them along.
We can see you guys the whole time.
Yeah. So as they're moving, they get ahead of them just enough to where they're getting ready to try to kind of like launch and get onto the beach. And no one wants to go because they're like, they're fucking there. They're waiting. They knew we were coming. And so I guess
couldn't get close enough to launch on the beach. They had to jump out into the water.
That's what I'm saying. And so the standard bearer that holds like the fucking staff or whatever it is, the dude who has the worst job ever because he's running the thickest shit without a weapon.
Mm-hmm. First off the boat.
He ends up jumping out, and that guy was the guy everyone had to protect. And so the soldiers are like, fuck. So they jump out.
Get back in the boat, asshole.
They jump out. They're just trying to throw ropes on him to drag him back. So they end up, having to jump in. They get set up enough to where they're able to establish like some battle lines. And the Brits are like, nah, we're good. And they end up like leaving. And Caesar's like, no, come, like, I want to fight. Like, come back.
I want to fight you.
And he can't chase them because he doesn't have any of his cavalry.
Well, and how far are you going to go? You don't know how big this landmass is.
You don't know what's there. Well, I mean, he still does kind of try to, poke around a little bit. He ends up getting one of his like foraging crews ambushed. There is a little bit of a battle, not just between there, but the forces kind of meet. Caesar may or may not have lost and retreated, which is kind of what it sounds like.
He did.
And so he ends up getting his guys back on the boat. He knows he's got to get back before the campaign season. He's got to travel quite a ways to get back. And so he loads his guys back up and he's like, okay, you know what? This was all we were trying to do, is just figure out if there were people here. Mission accomplished. We didn't lose. We won. No one's ever done this before. Remember the river? This guy did it right here.
We did lose a lot of boats, and I do want to go back. So I'm going to go ahead and winter back down in Cisalpine Gaul. Mm-hmm. You guys stick around up here and start building a bigger fleet for us to go back next year.
Yeah. Keep an eye across the channel. See if you can see them do. We keep seeing fires from across the channel.
We keep seeing fires and just the palest asses that you've ever seen.
Mm-hmm. These commentaries are still coming back to Rome about all of this stuff. An insane hit. He's on everybody's lips. He gets a 20-day thanks prayer thing. So, I mean, again, he's got more material they got to read out of. They got to extend the time out.
I think they said for the crossing of the Rhine in Britain, it was the largest tribute or the longest tribute that had ever been given to anybody.
The Thanksgiving thing.
Yeah. Which, I mean, longest Thanksgiving, longest tribute, whatever. If it's the longest in the history of the Roman Republic, that's a pretty big score.
And now the fact that he knows that there's something up there, that's tunnel vision. He wants to go ahead and invade Britain. That's kind of what he's planning to do for 54 BC.
Mm-hmm.
He gathers together 25 to 30,000. That seems to be his sweet spot. 25, 30,000 men. He's also got to take them across the English Channel. 2,000 cavalry, and then the rest stay to keep Gaul pacified. So at this point, lands. Apparently, the Brits weren't watching because he lands without opposition and basically goes on the hunt. He's like, I got my guys now. I got my cavalry. He can't hide.
You got to leave guys back in Gaul every time, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because if you don't, you head that way and then you're coming back to not so happy people.
Remember what we talked about? It was a couple years ago. I'm not saying in real time. I'm saying a couple years before this as far as the timeline. There were those gatherings that they were starting to build up. They haven't addressed that yet. So this is still kind of stewing, and his legions by themselves staying back there aren't going to really be able to have the impact of like a full assault of his full force.
You got to make sure that you're still coming back to an area that's welcoming of you.
I also think too, it's something that he doesn't know what's up there. People are impressed by this. If he has to spend another year and they're like, oh, he spent the year, like what, last year he went across the Rhine and he went up to like, why isn't he doing the Britain thing again?
Yeah.
He's got to keep going up. So at this point, the Brits are like, let's kind of like find out what these guys are about. So they start launching like a guerrilla war on them. This is their fucking home. They know how to fight here. And due to the fact that like, it feels like it's complete ineptitude on the side of the Britons at this point, when it comes to this like big main battle that they're going to have, the Britons are fighting on home turf. They have chariots, so they can outmaneuver. And they have cavalry, of course. But in addition, they have chariots, so they can outmaneuver these, infantry positions while their cavalry are taking on the other cavalry.
It's nuts, right? That they have chariots.
Yes, I heard that. I looked it up, and I was just like, I mean, it doesn't have to be fancy to be a chariot.
No. But you've come along enough in your evolution that you figured out the wheel. Then you figured out how to pull something with a horse behind it.
Yeah, dog sled is just a chariot without wheels. No chariot.
Yeah, I guess that's true. But also at the same time, horses had to have gotten out to the island at some point.
And domesticated.
Yeah.
And everything. And then teach them to actually pull a chariot. They'd obviously been developing it long enough that they worked well enough that it was a threat to fucking the Roman soldiers.
Yeah, I forgot what I was listening to, but it was a few different sources where the British people that were talking about it said this is actually one of the best times in British history because this is like the first time that Britain is mentioned in world history.
Oh, really?
Yeah. This is like the first time that Britain gets put on the map.
They don't come on the map well because despite having all these advantages, they kind of get their asses kicked enough to where King, Jesus, this name is long, oh my God, I'm going to say Cassivellaunus. It's Cassivellaunus surrenders after Caesar's forces are able to like locate and put siege to his stronghold and attack it. Caesar's like, all right, so here's the deal. You guys are Rome. You're not Rome, but you're Roman territory. You're all subjects of Rome. You're not citizens of Rome. You're subjects of Rome. So what we're going to need from you is you're going to have to start paying like taxes and everything. So you're going to have to send us a whole bunch of your stuff. Anything you guys got. We like gold. We like silver. You guys have a ton of trees around here. That's going to be fantastic. Do you guys have like minerals and all that other kind of stuff? Fantastic. So you're going to be sending a bunch of that down to Rome. And in case we need you to do anything, you're going to have to do it. And you're not allowed to fight against us. So welcome.
You didn't fight against us before. We just found you guys. I don't think they end up making a return trip to Britain for like 100 years or something like that.
Yeah, he leaves it. He's like, storm clouds are rolling and storm season's about to happen, so I'm heading out. And back in Gaul, a bad harvest had essentially forced, because of course you're fighting all of these fights, stuff's getting burned, crops are getting destroyed. This forces Caesar to be like, I got to spread my guys out.
Yeah.
Because if I put all of this on one tribe, the tribe's going to rebel against them and kill some of my guys. It's going to cause unrest. So I'll spread my guys out. I can't concentrate my forces as much, so it's not such a strain on like the local populace. And because of this, it leads to these situations where all of a sudden, less Roman troops. Rebellion starts looking a little bit more attractive.
Well, and it's tough. You're so far north that unless you're going to pull these Gallic tribesmen out to reinforce, you're not making it down to Italy to ask anybody there to come up and try to help you.
And all it takes is one little thing to set it off. And there's I don't know if he's a king or a leader or whatever. His name is Ambiorix. He was in the Euribanese, I'm horrible at
That
pronouncing.
sounded good to me.
I feel like I can pronounce other language. This seems like this is English. It's just weird sounding. That's why it's so hard to do. Is because it's just weird sounding English.
Gallic English.
Yeah. He ends up taking out Sabinus. I think we talked about him a little bit before. And this other guy this other leader that was with him, Lucius Cotta, and a full legion. Takes out 5,000 to 6,000 troops.
That's a lot of troops.
All of a sudden, word gets around, and this wind stirs up all these other tribes, and they're like, oh shit, like now is the time. They're at their weakest. We all need to do this now. And so the way they actually were able to take out this legion is they tricked Sabinus, and they told him, they're like, okay, we have scouts in the area and everything, and we just heard that there is a shit ton of Germans actually coming over and marching down this way. You guys should get out of here now. And he's like, oh my God, yeah, we probably should. And as they're like trying to organize and get out, they basically plan this huge ambush and attack and take them out. They try this same trick on this guy named Quintus Cicero. And he's like, that's interesting. Yeah, I'm going to call bullshit on that. And sends a letter to Caesar. He's like, something's up here. They're trying to pull something. And he's right, because as soon as he says he's not buying it, they turn and try to like assault. And they have, of course, where his legion is, they have a stronghold and everything. So they put this thing under siege for like 2 weeks. Caesar is able to get communication from them finally and hauls ass down there. It was under siege by like a 60,000 strong Gallic army.
It's a lot of legions if you're counting legions.
Yep. And Caesar ends up getting down there, beating that army. Cicero held that position, but lost 90% of his men.
Moral victory.
So if that's a legion, that's another 4,500?
Yeah.
So you're down a legion and most of another legion.
Like I say, it's a moral victory. And excuse me, they must have taken at least a little bit of the seriousness of potentially the Germans crossing back over the Rhine, because in 53 they dip down and they do the whole Rhine thing over again.
Yeah.
They cross the Rhine again, they engage, the Germans flee, and then they burn the shit down again.
Technically, I mean, you don't know. Did they attack that legion and wipe them out because it was just a good opportunity to do it? Or was there really a threat coming down?
True.
So you don't want to, take that risk. This basically leads to 53 BC being all about trying to control all this unrest and try to stop this revolt from building, any more of a head of steam. That's all of 53. So the news getting back to Rome probably isn't the greatest. Oh no, he's fighting in Gaul again. Why can't he just control that place?
Well, now he's got to fight against somebody who has my favorite name of this whole entire thing.
We come to 52.
The rise of this united Gallic force kind of comes under this fella who he has a statue out in the middle of what looks like nowhere, and I know we have to go see it 'cause it's like 15 feet tall. His name is Vercingetorix, all one name. Vercingetorix is a man with very long hair and a very long mustache. There were points in time where I don't know if the Romans didn't have a lot of facial hair. I know one thing about Caesar was he was going bald and he didn't like it. So he wore a
totally
laurel.
shaved.
Yeah.
It was the civic crown.
The laurel wreath.
It was that. He was allowed to wear that. So
weird that they're concerned about a king putting on a crown, but a laurel wreath is okay.
I don't know, man.
But
semantics.
Some of the things that scared them about the Britons, besides their blue painted faces that they said they had and their tattoos, these people just, I guess, looked like barbarians. And of course, any Gallic tribe that they ran across that they didn't know about, they just immediately called them barbarians. They said that they ate people. They were just terrible, horrible cannibals, when really they just hadn't run across them yet to realize.
Stop fucking encroaching on our land.
But apparently mustaches freaked out the Romans.
Yeah, they didn't like facial hair at all. Like, that was kind of like a taboo thing. In fact, wasn't that one of the things with Marius, was that as part of this, like when Sulla had kicked him, it wasn't Sulla that kicked him out, who kicked out Marius?
Sulla, wasn't it?
Was it Sulla?
Yeah.
Anyway, when he was like coming back, he had grown out his beard and his hair in like revolt about like, look at what they have done to me.
Yeah, that's right. When he was,
But yeah, they were not big into facial hair. That was one of the things about orderly and everything and shaving and shit.
yeah, so Vercingetorix, a man with long hair and this sweet mustache, ends up kind of combining these Gallic forces because they realize that they have a numbers advantage.
Largest forces of Gauls that had been assembled.
They put up with enough of this Roman shit that they're going to get the jump on Caesar's forces at a place called Gergovia. Gergovia.
Yeah. He knew how to like, everyone wanted something different and everyone had a different gripe, but what all of them could agree on is kind of the stuff centered around the religion. And he's like, listen, it's only going to be so long before they're just going to come in and destroy the areas that we considered sacred and holy as part of our, religion, everything like
our
that.
Pagan worship.
Yep. And basically that kind of got enough people on board. They're like, we can all get around on this point that they need to go. So they all joined together. How do you pronounce his name again?
Vercingetorix.
Vercingetorix. So his strategy in this whole thing is he's like, we're not too great about trying to fight these guys like in open, like pitch battle and everything. This is where they excel. Like they have all the fucking gadgets, the shields, the formations. What they need to have that all operational is they need supplies. We know where all that stuff is. This is fucking Gaul. Like we know the largest towns where they keep the largest supplies. We just have to control those areas. So that's kind of what he's doing. He's sacrificing the smaller, basically depots to capture these larger ones. And he's like, all we have to do is they can't stay here if they can't eat. We'll starve them out. They'll have to go back to the areas where they have more support or where it's friendlier. And then we use that time to even build up more forces. So if they come back, they can't get in. So through kind of the process of doing this, Caesar and Vercingetorix end up meeting at this place called,
Gergovia?
No, that's in just a second. So, Avaricum. And it's basically like a city that's kind of loyal to Vercingetorix. And he's like, listen, we need to get out of here. Like they can siege their asses off. Like you guys don't know what you're up against. The town was like, yeah, we're not fucking leaving. So he's like, I gotta go. Like I'm the fucking leader of this thing. I can't get caught. So
can't protect you.
Yeah. So Vercingetorix heads out after they refuse to do it. And of course, Caesar takes the city and kills 40,000 people. This is when Vercingetorix heads home, which is Gergovia. And that's when Caesar shows up and basically tries to do the same shit.
And pretty much the way that it worked was there were three lines. Is that what there were? There were 3 lines of fighting that the Romans had used in kind of this battle plan. They started pushing onto Vercingetorix's, basically his main force. And as they were pushing them back, attacking them, bringing the fight to them, there was a whole nother swath of a Gallic tribe that showed up, another Gallic army that showed up behind. And instead of Caesar trying to split his battle lines, he just went ahead and peeled off the 3rd battle line to turn around and fight off this invasion that was coming from the other side.
Yeah, it was the 2 in the pink. It's the shocker. He was having 2 attack the main force. And He basically just had the guys that were the 3rd line. He's like, rotate 180 degrees.
Peel off, you go that way, you hold them up. We're going to keep chasing Vercingetorix's forces. We're going to see how far we can push them. They end up getting pushed to this fortress town named Alesia that's on top of a hill. It's fucking beautiful. Just a gorgeous, gorgeous landscape, but it was like the most secure city in all of Gaul. It was up onto a hill. It had on the back sides of it, on the 2 back sides of it, sitting on top of the mountain was just thick forest that couldn't really be penetrated. Also, at the same time, it couldn't be escaped through. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. Yeah. And when the Romans roll up on them, they look at this fortress and like, shit, this is going to be really, really hard to lay siege on.
We still don't know what's going on kind of behind us.
Yeah.
We don't know how that's going. Like we're not in the greatest position.
So what can we do to these people? We can't fight Getorix. He's got the high ground. He's protected. But we can starve them out because they just ran a force of thousands of Gallic people into a town that's already sustaining themselves on what we have. So if we just go ahead and build a fence around this place and stop them from being able to come down the hill, A, it protects us, and B, it's going to start starving these people. as his third line ends up showing up behind them when they build around the fortress and they completely close off the fortress. They realize that those Gallic tribes are coming up on them. What do?
Oh, hold on. Okay, you're talking about the Siege of Alesia, right?
Yes.
Okay, so prior to this, when Vercingetorix heads home to Gergovia before that occurs,
okay.
Caesar actually shows up and actually gets beat pretty handily by Vercingetorix's troops or his army.
Yeah, that was when they got the jump on Gergovia, right?
Correct. So they end up getting beat, and what this basically does is this gets a whole bunch more of these Gallic tribes to go ahead and sign up. So
that's where the second wave probably comes from behind.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Yep. Okay, so they get there, they decide they're going to starve them out, and they end up building this 11 miles, right?
Yeah.
The one around okay. This is fucking insane. So Vercingetorix, this is the double wall battle. This is what I have this thing labeled as. Vercingetorix has like between 70 to 100,000. Again, these figures are probably inflated because if they're victories, then it makes it look even more impressive.
Oh yeah, of course.
So he decides on the siege over the attack because, again, he has forces, kind of all of us haven't caught up yet, and he understands that by sieging, he's at more of an advantage. So they build an 11-mile fence around the entire city and then set up their camp. They then proceed to build another larger fence around that. So they have an area in between that is just this huge Roman camp.
Yeah, you're trying to cut off any reinforcement that they can get from the outside after you lose this first battle.
While not getting attacked from the back as well.
Yeah.
And so it ends up being a total of 25 miles of fortifications. They said in some areas they use natural parts that would actually break it up and stuff like that.
Probably the forest.
But still, 25 miles of fortifications that had to be manned against attack, had to have watchtowers, a moat around it, all that kind of stuff. And this ends up being the thing that they're able to fend off any reinforcements, and they basically just starve them out. This is also the one where Vercingetorix has to empty the city of like the women and the children. And basically there's just this area between the city and this first fence that becomes this graveyard of fucking women and kids. Because they're trying to hold out as long as they can to hopefully more reinforcements show up and can break this third line.
Not knowing that there's a wall on the other side of the wall that
I'm sure they could see it.
Yeah, probably from up on the mountain you could see.
And they're like, what are they doing? They're building another wall. What do you mean? Facing the other way.
Yeah, and this whole idea of sending these women and children out it got so bad in Alesia that it was floated that we start killing the old people and eating the old people. Vercingetorix like, fuck no, dude, that's nuts. We're not going to be cannibals. Let's just send the women and children out where the Romans are.
I think it was a combination too of like, if we're going to try to last as long as we can to try to give these other gathering troops, we don't know how many people are coming to help us. We just got to hope it's a lot. So we got to give them as much time as we can.
Yeah.
There's only a certain amount of food we have in here. It's a horrible fucking decision, regardless of how you slice it.
You know, you're sending your women and children out to a group of people that have proven in their time in Gaul that they don't really care about not killing the women and children.
Yeah.
They're going to do it either way. Eventually, I believe it came down to like Vercingetorix basically being so hungry and starved that the gates of Alesia opened and he came out on a white horse and he was bobbing back and forth on top of the horse, barely able to hold himself up. He pulls up in front of Caesar. I'm sure they opened the gate at that point for him to come through. He pulls up in front of Caesar. He falls off of his horse and he stands up and he draws his sword. Is this for one last fight? His guards set up in front of him to try to protect him from whatever Vercingetorix is about to do, and Caesar calls him off, and he says, no, I know what's about to happen. Vercingetorix lays his sword down in front of Caesar and is immediately taken prisoner. You'd think, what do you need him for, right? You put him into prison, you haul him back to Rome. He ends up sitting in Rome in absolute darkness for 6 years.
Yeah, buddy. That is something that you can, if you got some bad PR.
Yeah.
What do? You bring out the guy that you defeated however many years ago it was, And hey, remember this was the guy that threatened Rome, the Gallic leader and everything. It's still going to buy you some fucking PR points.
Yeah, everybody's going to like it. It's going to look good.
It's so crazy to break it down like that because that's exactly.
Yeah.
I'm going to need you later. Trust me. I mean, you're going to die. I'm not going to need you for anything good, but I don't want you. I want people to see you die.
We're going to keep you alive. We're not going to let you see the light of day for 6 years, which seems like maybe the worst torture possible. Could you imagine just not seeing anything for 6 years?
And the first time he sees light is on the way to go die. Yeah.
Yeah.
So kind of jumping back a little bit, something does happen in late 54. Julia dies.
Oh, that's right.
And so this was kind of the only thing that was really tying together Pompey and Caesar. Again, Caesar's off doing his own thing. Pompey's in Rome. And the relationship starts to kind of like deteriorate. And as this situation, is deteriorating everything, Pompey is kind of not playing ball with Caesar as much as, they were during the early days of the triumvirate. Caesar can't really do a whole lot about that because for 51 and 50, he's still having to. This was kind of the end of the major revolt.
It was the end of the United Gallic Force. Now he's back to just mop-up duty, right?
Exactly. He's got to make sure that this doesn't happen again, that there aren't enough left of them to basically raise a force. It's fucking disgusting to say that. 51, he does it, and then 50 is pretty light on it. So that's basically kind of the last gasp of this Gallic revolt, basically.
Over the entire Gallic wars that happened, and again, there's just no way that they could get an accurate population number. It was said that there were 12 million Gauls in all of the land, and by the time Caesar was done, he had killed over 1 million Gauls and taken over 1 million Gauls prisoner.
Mm-hmm.
Those numbers are obviously punched up just because of the logistics of moving 1 million people and killing 1 million people.
It's 10 years.
It is, but at the same
you
time,
can constantly do it because you have your forces out there.
Yeah,
I know.
It's genocide. It's for sure genocide.
I want to say it's punched up because it's fucking gross, but
yeah.
So as this relationship, is deteriorating with Pompey and everything like that, some of these allies that Pompey is making, these new ones, start to kind of challenge Caesar and some of his stuff, some of the legislation he's putting through. Caesar's probably calling him and be like, "Hey, Pompey, your boy is trying to shoot down my shit," and he's like, "I don't know what to tell you, man. He's going to do what he's going to do."
He's got some good ideas too. I think we should hear him out.
Yeah, and Pompey ends up siding with Bibulus and Cato, and this is like the ultimate betrayal because these are the guys that are like the main guys that are like anti-Caesar.
So I think, not to try to humanize Pompey at any point because he killed a lot of people too and was not a good guy. This kind of begins this time period where Pompey finally is being accepted by the Senate. Like, he won all of these major military victories, and he hung his hat on being the guy that was outside of the city, and he was killing people. Then he comes back in and kind of has to play this diplomat role in certain areas, and he's sitting in the Senate. He kind of gets bored because he loves going out and killing things.
I just want to kill something.
Yeah. So once he starts getting ears in the Senate, and he kind of starts listening to him and realizes, hey, I have to be here every day to try to fight this battle for me, Caesar, and Crassus. Yeah. If I start siding with some people outside of Caesar, this is going to give me time to maybe go out and kill some people again.
Yeah. Some of the shit that they're doing is also hurting my reputation because I'm having to support it, and I want shit that I want to get done that I'm not going to be able to unless I make friends with these people.
Well, people are also forgetting what I did.
Yeah, that's
They're
true.
forgetting how I made my claim to fame.
Well, basically, this whole siding with Bibulus and Cato, this starts to kind of like generate this talk about like forcing Caesar to return.
Yeah, we also missed it. 53, Crassus ends up dying in the Battle of Carrhae in Persia. So in
that's
Turkey.
right. Yep.
So, I forgot what their empire is at this point in time, but it's Persia, it's Turkey. It's the new Persian Empire that's popped up after ATG rolled through there and they've rebuilt.
How did he end up dying?
In battle.
Okay.
I don't remember exactly how it went, but
I want to say it was more ceremonial than that, but we'll cover that at a certain point in time. So the triumvirate is also, what weakens it is you don't have 3 fucking legs on the table anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And the only thing that was tying Pompey together in this, again, was Julia, who
Dead wife.
also actually died during childbirth. So he also lost both a wife and a kid, and probably is kind of getting tired of Caesar's shtick.
Crassus is out. They lost kind of another power broker. Pompey has lost Crassus. He doesn't have anybody at home. He's falling away from Caesar. He's finding kind of new friends in the Senate. And that doesn't turn out good for Caesar because Caesar still has a laundry list of shit that's hanging over his head that he's only added to in Gaul.
And if he doesn't have that support in the Senate, he can't get appointed to another position, and then he's on the fucking hot seat.
Yeah, and when you have what we were talking, the last one was 50, when it didn't really seem like there was a lot going on in Gaul because it was just kind of mop-up duty.
There was some stuff going on in Rome.
Yep. And there was some talk in the Senate about, well, why are we having Caesar still out there doing this? We're coming time to an end. Maybe he just hangs them up and comes back. And immediately Caesar's like, shit, I need a new job. What can get me out of this?
They're throwing out that disarm word. And he's like, right now, this is how I project power. Like, this is where my power is at right now. And basically, the consul that's serving at the time, they're wanting to have a serious discussion about this in the Senate. And they're also talking about, hey, if we're going to, we can't just paint this in a way that's going to disarm Caesar. We need to put this in a situation where it looks like it's square across the board. So it's not only going to be Caesar that's disarming, it's also going to be certain people that are political opponents. We're not going to need all these people. We're good with the empire. Everything's pretty lax right now. Yeah. Most of the stuff that was popping off, aside from Crassus getting killed and everything just recently.
That'll be avenged later.
Yeah, Gaul looks to be squared up. So we're going to dial down all these personal armies. And during this discussion, because the consul that was currently serving, or one of them, was pretty pro-Caesar, he's trying to basically stall this thing, kill it where he can, and he just dissolves the talks about it. And until 49, that kind of drops it.
Well, and the push from Caesar is, I need a new job. I want to run for consul in absentia while I'm in Gaul.
It's been 10 years.
Yeah. I got my chance. Get me back in there. I want to run for it again. No, you got to cross the Rubicon without your people. You have to, drop that army that you've been training to love you for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
You got to disband those guys.
And all those guys that you've captured now are fighting that,
Yeah.
We don't know how many legions you're hiding back there.
None of that. And Caesar's petitioning so hard, just make me consul. I don't have to come back. And they said, no, disarm. You got to come back to do this. And this
consul with an army is not a thing.
Yeah, exactly. That's what you're saying.
With an existing army, because once you're consul, then you can go,
But at the same time, it's one or the other. You got to give up this life if you want to do it. We're going to immediately probably imprison you as soon as you get back before you can throw your name in the hat for consul, but we'll see what happens. And this is kind of where you see the, I guess, circle of history that happens in the Roman world, where Sulla, who was no friend of Caesar, marched his troops across the Rubicon to come take power back. And now Caesar is met with the exact same choice, even though they were diametrically opposed in their views and how things went. But you still have to make the same decision because it's this self-sacrifice that you can't make.
They know this is a likelihood. So Pompey is basically given the task of if he crosses the Rubicon, that's actually a saying, crossing the Rubicon. And basically what it means is you're crossing the point of no return. So if he crosses that, Pompey, you're going to be the one to stop him. Pompey apparently made this big show saying I'll be the one to do it. They're like, the nearest army that you have control of is either in Spain or not even on the Italian fucking peninsula. How are you going to, he's much closer. He's like, I can stomp my foot and raise an army. So
probably right. Honestly,
he had a lot of money.
But he had a war record that was...
Yeah, but that's the thing is how many people just around the area of Rome where you could gather them are not already serving out in someone else's his army or in another location as part of your army.
That's fair.
So Caesar makes another proposal. He's like, listen, let's go ahead and disarm and do all that kind of stuff. He's like, but everybody disarm. We all need to come to the table. Everyone just be cool. And it's rejected. And at that point,
they knew Caesar had an ankle gun.
They
didn't trust him.
And at that point, they're like, okay, so I guess, Caesar's an enemy of the state. And after this is declared, he's like, well, if I'm a fucking enemy of the state, I guess I don't have to worry about not crossing that Rubicon. So he ends up marching the troops across.
Yeah. January 10th or 11th in 49 BCE. Caesar makes the fateful move of crossing the Rubicon. And of course, when he does, what are the famous words that he says?
Let the dice be rolled.
The die has been cast.
The die has been cast.
This is what we are going to do. This is where we're going to hang our fates. And that essentially starts a civil war. He had a loose plan, was to go ahead and capture Pompey and then force a conference to kind of use Pompey, I guess, as leverage. Pompey hears about this when they're in Rome, and him and his company just fuck off to Greece.
Anybody that's on that Cato, Pompey, anyone on that side is like, yeah, if he's marching in here, we've seen what happened, like Sulla with the proscriptions and everything. Yeah, that ain't going to be us. So
Cato took off with Pompey to Greece.
Yeah. So Caesar's like, I just want to talk. I mean, aggressively, and you guys are going to be highly outnumbered. Pompey ends up leaving for Greece. Caesar actually goes and he's like, okay, I don't have the ships right now. It'll take me a while. I'm going to have them start building them. What I'm actually going to do is Pompey still has troops over in the Spanish provinces and everything in the Iberian Peninsula.
He spends 2 weeks in Rome first.
He's got to empty the treasury and he's got to raid the fucking treasury first, get some cash.
How else are you going to build new ships?
Yeah.
You need money. You're not up in Gaul anymore, so you got to open the bank yourself.
Just slaps down the black card and he's like, just build a whole bunch of them. Charge it. So he's like, I'm going to head off to, the area over there and take out Pompey's forces on the Spanish provinces. I don't have to worry about leaving Rome to chase them, having his forces move in and, fucking things up.
Yeah, he bangs out all of the troops, beats up Pompey's troops in Pharsalus on August 9th.
Sicily.
Yeah, he comes through Sicily. They end up dropping down into North Africa, where eventually... I think Pharsalus was before that. He knocks out 2 of Pompey's legions in Spain. Mm-hmm. Then they hit Sicily. Yep. Then they fail in North Africa. And not necessarily a failure, but a few defeats to the point where it's like, I should probably just go take care of Pompey first.
I've also literally just taken Rome and then just bugged out after 2 weeks. I can't be away too long. I haven't really even established, they're holding the seat for me and everything, but who knows when stuff could pop off.
He had left somebody, his name started with an L. It was like Libius or something like that.
Lepidus or something?
Yeah, Lepidus, I believe.
Yeah.
In Rome to kind of keep an eye on things I'm sure he left a legion or 2 there too, probably.
Just within range.
Yeah, just to control things a little bit.
I'm totally not at all camped outside the gates or anything like that, right?
Yeah.
So he ends up returning to Rome and sets himself up as consul for 48 BC. And after he gets himself set up, he's like, okay, it's official. I am consul. Everyone's aware of it. Cool. I got to go talk to some people.
Yep.
And his ships are built at that point. So he heads to Greece. He ends up fighting Pompey at...
Yes, I'm so excited for you to hear that, or to say this.
Dyrrhachium?
I think so. Dyrrhachium. Got to be Dyrrhachium, right?
Dyrrhachium.
Yeah. That's
Dyrrhachium sounds more
crazy.
Roman.
It's too many consonants next to each other.
And Pompey actually comes out of the gate kind of hot because he ends up forcing Caesar to flee.
Yeah.
So I don't know if he just underestimated, but these are also areas that are controlled by Rome, which means going down there, Pompey has a shit ton of money. He goes down to Greece and he's like, all right, who wants to get paid?
There's also a great chance, too, that just because they were trying to make landfall, he probably had...
He had an advantage,
definitely. Yeah. Doesn't take long for the tables to turn, though.
No.
Caesar ends up doing exactly that. He goes on the offensive. Pompey and his forces start to head further down into southern Greece. Excuse me. I don't know where they stopped. I forgot to write it down. There was a defeat. Pompey's forces at Pharsalus. That's where it was on August 9th.
Okay.
This would send Pompey fleeing down to Egypt, and it would send Cato fleeing to North Africa. And Pompey is headed down to Egypt because earlier on in his consulship, he had actually made some donations to Ptolemy the 13th. And the Ptolemies are going to be an episode that's so filled with incest.
Oh, yeah. And they've been at it for a long time.
So long. So Ptolemy the 13th, the younger brother of Cleopatra, who was his wife.
real quick. So after he beats Pompey at Pharsalus, he basically uses that as kind of a springboard, and he's like, okay, so we're definitely in a civil war. I'm just going to go ahead and do dictator for a year.
Oh, that's when he calls it?
That's when he ends up calling it. So at that point now, kind of makes it to where the Senate's not a thing, which I'm never a good time to be a dictator or anything. But if that's an availability at that point, and it doesn't mean what it means today, him doing that when he was out of the country and away from that power base, that's when you're going to logically do it. Yeah,
good call. I don't know how much it would have mattered having those forces that close to Rome if the Senate were to try to do anything, but you were chasing the guy that they had tasked with stopping you from doing what you're about to do.
Exactly. So, he ends up catching a couple guys that don't end up fleeing.
Yep.
Named Cicero and Marcus Brutus.
Marcus Junius Brutus.
And they're basically like, please, dog, pardon us, man, please. And he's like, you know what? Yeah, I'm in a good mood today. I'm going to go ahead and pardon you guys. You guys didn't piss me off as much as Pompey, and I don't even know why you guys ran.
I used to bang your mom.
Yeah. Like
you gave her a pearl.
We're practically family. Are we family? Are you mine? One of mine? And so, ends up giving them pardons. But then we come to, like you were saying, Ptolemy the 13th.
Do we foreshadow Brutus first? Because Brutus actually comes from a long line that he's descended from the Brutus that killed the last king of Italy.
Yeah.
Or the last king of the Roman Empire.
He's Kingslayer. He's like Lannister.
Yeah, I don't know who Lannister is, but yeah, it's a...
Game of Thrones reference.
Yeah, that one.
You got it.
Tiberius, not the little guy?
His name's not Tiberius.
Oh
my God, I'm drawing a blank. I can't think of what his name is right now. It's Peter Dinklage.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Tyrion.
Oh my
Tyrion
God,
Lannister. I didn't even watch the show. I just remember.
I've been reading too many fucking Roman names. So Ptolemy is there kind of waiting for Pompey to show up. Pompey's got his wife with him on the boat. She had been on some Greek island. He swung by, picked her up.
You don't leave her behind when Caesar's hunting you.
Yeah, exactly.
He's
no wives or daughters.
He's either going to bang her or kill her. That's maybe both.
Or in that order, probably. So the ship ends up pulling up. There's like a guard out there, the Pharaoh's guard, and a couple of Roman soldiers actually come out in a rowboat with some other people, and it's like, hey, you can't get the ship in that close. It's going to end up bottoming out and everything. So we have to actually bring you over here in like a little transfer boat. And you got to imagine at that point, Pompey was just like, yeah, these guys are totally going to fucking murder me.
He still has to think he has some sort of an ally there, though, because why wouldn't he have fled to North Africa with Cato?
Yeah, I know, but you gotta, come on, you always gotta be thinking that you're gonna get murdered.
Yeah.
You're in the perfectly murderable position at this point, which ends up coming to pass because they start getting closer to shore, and all of a sudden, as it comes up on the sand and he goes to get out, he just gets the shit stabbed out of him by these couple of Roman guys that were in the boat.
And head lopped off. I imagine he's like leaning over the edge of the boat to take his first step out, and you just see a sword come down and chop his head off.
Yeah, Caesar ends up showing up like 3 days later and finds out that Ptolemy's like, meets him on the docks and is like, hey, Caesar. He's like, I brought you a present. And he shows him fucking Pompey's head, and Caesar is just kind of like, what the fuck? He's like, I didn't want him fucking dead right now.
I hate to give Caesar undue credit for humanitarian efforts because he wasn't a humanitarian. Caesar's a tough case for me. Personally, don't like Caesar. Was Caesar cool? Undoubtedly. Very, very cool. But Caesar has these moments of, I don't know, call it humanity, call it whatever you want to call it, but to pardon Brutus, to pardon the other guy that was with Brutus in Greece?
Oh, God damn it, I just had it written down. Cicero.
Cicero. To give those guys a pass after, again, taking up arms eventually against him, it kind of shows that maybe he does have a little bit of a human side. Now, it does come back to bite him in the ass, so maybe it's good. But at the same time, he had been in cahoots with Pompey for a very long time. He didn't want to kill Pompey. He wanted to take him back. He probably wanted to try to get his head on straight and make sure that he was going to kind of fall into line again. But this is sort of the first time in their relationship, especially now that Crassus is gone, to where Caesar's the one that's holding all the cards.
I also think the fact that he pardoned, like you were saying, he pardoned those two guys. He was either going to use Pompey as a political tool and being like, hey, you're fucking back in my pocket now. Like, let's forget about this stuff. Cato's going to get his, because I know that that's who was the ringleader. We have familiar ties. I don't know if it was going to be emotionally motivated, but he definitely wanted to either dispense that justice himself or get some use out of him before he did so.
For sure.
But he's sitting in front of Ptolemy in fucking Alexandria, and he's like, I can't fucking cause a scene here because these guys fucking outnumber us and they could kill me. So he's just like, thank you.
Cool, man.
And Ptolemy's like, okay, come to the palace. So he pretty much has to, he's fucking pissed about this whole Pompey situation, but he has to basically play nice with Ptolemy because he doesn't want to get fucking murdered. At the same time, Ptolemy has this fucking smoking hot, highly cultured sister wife, Cleopatra, who has not been able to meet Caesar at this point, but has heard a lot about him. And at this point, she's like, Ptolemy shouldn't be fucking, like, the kid's got fucking 6 toes. Like, he should not be running the show.
I believe he was Ptolemy the 13th. I think he was 16 years old at this time.
Yeah. And she's like, and it's fucking, like, I don't want to have to ever have sex with this dude. So
he's my brother. I know that's our family thing, but.
So as he's being held in Ptolemy's, basically as a captive guest at Ptolemy's, palace and everything, Cleopatra sneaks herself in a laundry bag that she has one of her servants. I assume it's just this big jack dude carrying this huge.
Gotta be.
It's just laundry, guys. Gets past all the guards, gets into Caesar's chambers, drops the bag off, and just walks out. Bag unties, drops. Cleopatra's sitting there.
If we had access to a time traveling device, I think I would want to go back and see exactly what Cleopatra looked like, because there's a lot of talk about maybe we put her beauty on a higher standard than like her intellect was.
Like her myth overshadows the fact, which it's, even if she wasn't beautiful, I do believe the cultured stuff because she was royalty and everything like that. She probably, because you think of Ptolemy and all the inbreeding and everything like that, like, there's a lot of, but then you also think of the Munsters.
True. Yeah. It's a good point.
Yeah. Sometimes you get a hot one, or you think in situations where you get like the trailer park hottie that shouldn't exist in that environment. Every so often, the genetics don't work against each other and they work with each other. So maybe Cleopatra's, one of those.
A positive mutation?
Yeah, like 2 negatives equal a positive or some shit like that. So, yeah.
I would just love to see and put it to rest to know, just even in my mind, even if we couldn't prove it, like, was she hotter than she was cool, or was she just so cool that she was that hot for everybody?
It might be that situation too.
Yeah.
So she ends up, he's fucking smitten as a kid, and he's like, you fucking cultured woman, you're foreign, you're hot and everything, and we can get you to be the fucking king or the queen of this place pretty easily. But first, they have to figure out a way to get the fuck away from Ptolemy. So through some maneuvering and everything, they're able to get away from him and back to kind of where her power base is, which is he in Cairo and then she's in Alexandria? I think he's in Alexandria.
Yes.
Maybe she's in Cairo, right? Okay.
This is kind of where we get into the fun, cool shit, because them being in Alexandria, this harkens back to an episode that we did so long ago on Alexandria. I think this is kind of where we started talking Alexander the Great and talked about how once he went, there was this big war for all of his lands and all of his conquests.
That's what the Ptolemaic dynasty was. Think of it in this sense. We have Ptolemy the 13th. Okay?
Yeah.
This place was formed by Ptolemy, who was one of the generals of Alexander the Great. That's how long they held Egypt. Cleopatra is closer, and I know you probably hear this fact all the time because it's on, well, maybe we just do so much research on this shit that's why we hear it.
Yeah.
Cleopatra existed closer to us than she did to the construction of the pyramids. That's how old they are.
Yeah, that every time I hear it, it just kind of makes me shake my head. Late 48, he's elected to the dictatorship in absentia again. This is when he begins this fight with Ptolemy. And this is where we get back to the Alexandria episode. If you haven't listened to it, go listen to it. I'm a little scared to say that because we were still pretty new and I don't know how great it was, but it was such a fun episode. This is where you get the swashbuckling Caesar where he goes to light the boats on fire and he ends up...
he puts it to the torch in the harbor, but then it spreads and everything.
And he burns the library in Alexandria down. This is where we end up talking about the tower in Alexandria as well. And just
the Pharaoh's Tower or whatever it was.
All of the cool shit that they had down there. And the fact that Caesar just basically went nuts down there. He lights possibly the most important library in the history of the world.
She was so hot. He burned down the Library of Alexandria for her.
Yeah. He ended up somehow finally getting reinforcements.
We could have been living in fucking utopia right now with all the information that was lost.
But she was so hot, he was willing to do that. He does get his reinforcements. He ends up defeating him. He places Cleopatra as the queen of Egypt.
March 47 is when Ptolemy's out, Cleopatra is in. And then he hangs out down there because he's like, fucking why not?
Yeah, in order to be a queen, you have to have a king. So she goes ahead and marries her younger brother than Ptolemy the 13th. I don't know what his name was, but she ends up...
Oh, yeah, she couldn't marry him.
Yeah, because you got to keep it in the family for the Ptolemies.
You do, but at the same time... Okay, so I'm trying to put myself in Caesar's shoes here. You got the shot to be fucking Pharaoh.
Yeah.
Or...
They're not called Pharaoh yet, I don't think, but...
What do you mean? They were Pharaoh when it was ancient Egypt, and they just kept the thing going. Remember Alexander?
I thought we gave them Pharaoh.
Alexander tied it back to where he was labeled Pharaoh. Remember he tied himself back to the sun god so he could get the official title as Pharaoh? So
we need to get back to Egypt.
Yeah. So he could be a Pharaoh, but at the same time, he would have to marry her. But is he married up in Rome?
No.
The fuck are you not marrying her for?
We didn't talk about it. It was something weird that happened with Pompeii where they had this festival to the woman god or something like that. And some guy broke in and saw the women's stuff. And it's an odd story that,
Okay. It was a guy that was a senator.
Yep.
He was kind of higher standing. There was supposed to be this all-female festival or worship thing that was taking place at Caesar's house being run by Pompeii.
Because he was the
I think this is just an excuse for like a bunch of women to get together and drink wine and fucking like talk shit.
And cool. I hope they had fun every time they did it.
So this guy ends up dressing up like a woman, sneaking into the house. He ends up getting caught. And the word was that maybe he was having an affair with Caesar's wife or something like that. And that's why he snuck in, because a woman caught him and she's like, what are you here for? And the only word he said was supposed to be like Pompeii or something. And so because of this whole scandal thing, Caesar's like, I'm divorcing her. And they're like, well, if she wasn't guilty of anything like you said, then why are you divorcing her? He's like, the wife of Caesar must be beyond doubt or something like that. So he's single at this point. Why don't you marry Cleopatra? I don't get it. But anyway, she's queen pharaoh in March 47, and late June, she has a kid. What?
Yeah, math seems interesting upon him showing up and becoming pregnant and having a child.
I mean, he shows up in 48, and then he's hanging out, meets her, and in late June, she has a kid. Yeah.
Well, and...
I mean, the kid's name is Caesarion.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Yeah, you could probably tell by the name, right?
So is it that who Caesarion section is named after?
No, because Cleopatra lives after her.
That's true, but maybe, I don't know. But Caesar lived after, or his mom lived after, so why would it be that?
That's what it had to have gone.
It's just another thing that he wanted to be named after or something like that.
I'm sure it had happened sometime in the past.
I figured it out. Caesarion was alive at the time that the first successful one happened and a woman lived. And he's like, it's a miracle. And that was because of me. So we're going to call that a cesarean section.
It sounds like history to me. That sounds right. Yeah, so odd that Caesar doesn't claim a child named Caesarion from his love interest in Egypt, but he doesn't claim her.
I did such good things that she just named her child that she had with her other younger brother after me, that they weren't together at the time. You know what? It's best not to question it. The gestation cycles work differently down here for these people, but
he's not going to be a Ptolemy, though.
No.
Oh, yeah. They loved each other so much, they went on like a 3-month love session down the
Nile.
Yeah, down the Nile River.
Pleasure fucking cruise. I'm not going to lie. Being like a guest on that
2 weeks, that's what it was.
Might have been the craziest fucking thing ever.
Yeah.
Can you imagine they're basically on their honeymoon cruise?
Uh-huh. And you're along for the ride
and
to
it's
see
the fucking
everything.
New Pharaoh of Egypt and the fucking Emperor of Rome.
Yeah, that's a pretty powerful...
God, if cocaine existed back then.
They had to have had something beyond wine at that point. Yeah, June or July in 47, Italy finally comes calling because there were some choices that he had made sending Mark Antony back to Rome to kind of lead while he was off doing his thing.
Oh, yeah, this is where Mark Antony comes in. He's been kind of, like we haven't mentioned him, he's been kind of a minor player at this point, but he's kind of trusted by Caesar, so he's kind of doing stuff back in Rome.
Not well.
No, and if you're wondering, oh, wait, wasn't Cleopatra and Mark Antony? Oh, yeah. Oh,
got it on, too. So before he ends up showing back up in Rome, he goes to Pharnaces, and they were making incursions onto the land of Pontus, which was his father's former land.
It's just like it's a detour.
Yeah.
It's like, no, he literally goes to the complete fucking, what it would be, the eastern side of the Mediterranean to Antioch, beats King Pharnaces. This is where we get the term Veni Vidi Vici. I came, I saw, I conquered. This is when he uttered that. That is a quote of Caesar. And who knows if he actually said at the time or when he was writing it down. He's like, I didn't have anything fucking cool to say.
Well, and it was a spin-off of things that had been said before.
Yeah. But at that point, he's like, okay, everything good here? All right, back to Italy. Mark Antony's in charge. And what are you going to do? You're going to make yourself consul for 46, right?
Yeah. Antony had run afoul of the Roman people because there was a rebellion that had happened and he was down in southern Italy. He ended up not making it up back into Rome quick enough, and he eventually does quell the rebellion, but they realize that Antony is not Caesar because Caesar wouldn't have allowed the rebellion to happen in the first place. So they needed somebody who was going to be strong and solid to get there. Once Caesar gets back, he just goes ahead and demotes Antony all the way back down to, I don't know, he was still in the royal court on some level.
Plebe.
But yeah, he wasn't second command by any means. He would return to mop up some more forces in North Africa. At the same time, he starts seizing this land and selling this land of his enemies at home to basically pay for what's going on in North Africa. You haven't been on raid really in a while. I'm sure you got some stuff out of Egypt.
He goes down to Africa for Cato.
Yes, he does. Yeah. Cato, who had fled to North Africa, ends up deciding to kill himself over asking for clementia.
Not sure where Utica is, but that's where it ends up happening. He's hiding with a bunch of like anti-Caesarians. That's also what they're called if you're anti-Caesar. You're pro-Caesarian or anti-Caesarian.
Yeah, and you got to think, being down there, there's a great chance that after he got picked off coming across North Africa from Spain the first time, it was probably pro Pompey.
Yeah.
Forces in North Africa.
Yeah.
So he goes down there. He tries to pick up Cato. Cato ends up killing himself over asking for forgiveness from him. There were a couple other higher ups down there that did the same. After that, he kind of clears up in Numidia, clears everything out, and begins annexing that territory for the Roman Empire. Caesar comes back and throws one hell of a party.
Oh, yeah, the ultimate triumph.
You got 4 triumphs in one. You have Gaul, you have Egypt, you have Pharnaces, and then you have Juba in Africa.
Let's also not forget that I did touch on the other side of the Rhine. And I did touch, and we haven't really talked about that much, but I think he's back in June of 46, right? That's when he's back in Italy.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, because that was after his North Africa trip.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, when you're throwing 4 triumphs, you have to, make some fun. So you bring out one of Cleopatra's younger sisters, you bring back Joba's son from North Africa, and you bring back our old friend Vercingetorix. And this is the first time that Vercingetorix has been pulled out into the sunlight in the last 6 years, butt-ass naked.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't even bother to give him a toga or a robe. I guess if you're in the dark for 6 years, you probably don't worry about clothes.
Yeah.
It's probably the last thing you care about. He holds it up to the people. He says, "Should we pardon Cleopatra's sister?" Everybody in the square cheers. "Should we pardon Joba's son?" Everybody in the square cheers. He conveniently forgets to ask if they should pardon Vercingetorix. And
how should we kill Vercingetorix?
Yeah. It turns out that this was maybe one of the just most vicious things. He was ceremonially choked in front of everybody in the square. So, we didn't put him up on a crucifix. We didn't just cut his head off. We had the guy with the 2 strongest hands in the crowd come up and just choke out Vercingetorix in front of everybody. That's a wild way to end such a noble fight, trying to bring the Gauls all together against Rome to just be strangled in front of everybody.
It's like a reminder. This is why Gaul is pacified.
Yeah, and the people loved it. Along with that, he comes back and he starts throwing these reforms out left and right. The soldiers were given land, and they were given 24,000 sesterces, which was like a lifetime of military pay for these guys. Later on in the year, he headed up to Spain with news of another uprising, because I'm sure Pompey's people were back out there making hay again.
Those were his 2 kids.
Okay.
It was the 2 sons of Pompey that were causing ruckus up in Spain.
When they get there, they realize that maybe he had rested on his laurels a little bit. Maybe his guys weren't as sharp as they used to be, and Pompey's sons kind of start getting the better of him. And he pulls one of the just wildest military stunts ever. Rides to the front, jumps off of his horse, throws off his helmet, throws down his weapon, and is just holding his buckler, his shield. He looks back at his men and he yells, "If I die, you die." And just starts marching up and down the front, and spears are being hucked at this shield.
I wonder how in the literature, yes, if it's coming from him, what I think happened is he came up, he's like, "Come on, guys, fuck," and throws his helmet down.
Yeah,
being
out of anger.
And then turns into all the guys are on the wall or across the battlefield. They're just looking at him and they're fucking pointing and laughing and everything.
Get him?
And he's walking up there and he's like, "Fucking get him, guys." And one spear gets thrown and he blocks it and he's like, "You guys better fucking attack."
If they cut the head off this snake, you guys are dead too. But it's enough to rally the forces and end up squashing this rebellion in Spain. And he still can't lose. He's such a good military general. And again, we're talking about a guy that fought from the front all the time. This is where Napoleon gets the balls to do the stuff that Napoleon does, is because he's such a fan of what Caesar did. He learns all of these different techniques from what Caesar was doing while he was leading his army. After he ends up winning in Spain, before he heads back for another triumph, he starts to hear that the Parthians in Persia are causing a ruckus, and he's got to go back and sure up Crassus's death at the hands of the Parthians in Persia.
Did we mention, in addition to consul, that he did make himself dictator for 46?
No, but I mean,
this is something he's going to, I think, do essentially each year before in 44. He eventually is just like, "Guys, I'm getting tired of having to renew this thing every year. Dictator for life."
Well, yeah. Before that, they had given him 10 years. So I'm sure they probably got tired of getting their noses rubbed in it every year. So 10 years? And then eventually he ends up claiming in 44, Dictator Perpetuo. But they're getting geared up to head over and take on the Persians again. These Parthians that killed Crassus need to be quelled. Since 49, this is what you were talking about. So since 49, Caesar would be elected dictator 4 times. They would extend his dictatorship to 10 years before appointing him Dictator Perpetuo in 44 BC. Caesar's reforms were very, very popular with the people. There was kind of this growing resentment in the Senate, though, because of this perceived disrespect. When I say perceived disrespect, it was certainly disrespect.
He's the dictator. They can't do anything.
Well, as he would go in and sit and listen to the Senate, they said that he would just look completely disinterested.
He didn't have to pay attention because anything that anybody else that was proposing that wasn't already in his head because it was his thought was unimportant.
He had cut one of the members of the Senate off one day and had called the session short because he had claimed diarrhea. And they had pushed back against it.
You're eating a lot of rich food. You're going to get the fucking squirts, man. I don't know what to tell you.
They said that they didn't.
Lobster.
Yeah, they said that they didn't believe him that he had diarrhea because he was able to walk home on his own. Mm-hmm. Like that was.
I mean, I've had diarrhea and I can walk. Like, yeah, dude. But I mean, I guess if it's adjournment of this fucking Senate session diarrhea, you better just like be squatting out of there.
It was so bad that they considered him a liar because he was able to walk after claiming diarrhea. Just a wild move. But at the same time, that this disrespect is kind of starting to gain traction, this belief in this disrespect. He does a lot of stuff. He increases all of the magistrates, so everybody in the Senate from 600 to 900. Part of that is because what he's doing is he has now extended Roman citizenship to everyone in Italy. So if you're going to extend Roman citizenship outside of the city of Rome to everybody in Italy to try to bring them together, you're going to need more representation. Mm-hmm. So you're giving these people a say while growing your population.
Oh, do we all get to be citizens? No. Just Italy, all Gaul and North Africa. No. You guys are subjects. Don't get crazy.
We're not getting nuts.
But because he's making that technically Rome and everything in Italy and giving them citizenship, he's also going to establish these other colonies outside of Italy more permanently, like Carthage and Corinth and everything.
The brilliant thing doing that as well is when you establish these outside colonies, all of the people that are ex-military that you've been promising this land to, mm-hmm. you can immediately reduce the population size in the city of Rome by sending them out to the colonies.
Yeah, and giving them leadership roles and everything like that.
And so you take pressure off of the agricultural side of things and needing to provide for all these people in these swelled cities.
It's the fucking Lebensraum or living space. Or
pretty much.
Mussolini called it.
And the whole entire idea of that is to kind of make things better for people. It was a certain number of people a year that were allowed to come in and get grain free from the state, just because all of these people from all of these outer areas that were poor, that they were going over and dominating, and all of these subjects to Rome, eventually realized that if they moved closer to where the free stuff was, they would have a better life, because you could get grain for free at that point in time out of the allotment that was coming. Caesar kind of revamps that. Once he shrinks the population size, because you don't need to take care of that, there's going to be more food that goes around for everybody. He created something that I thought was pretty interesting, permanent jury pools for courts. So instead of going and facing a jury during a trial that could potentially be filled with people that were stacked against you, there's just these jury pools that were constantly hearing cases. So there was less of a chance that you were going to have a negative interaction unless it was like outside of the Senate or anything like that with these people.
What if those people that were already assigned had beef with you already?
And you better not fuck up.
I guess not.
You better not do anything wrong. Citizenship, like I said, was offered to some of these far-flung lands. Of course, there was plenty of different things that went along with that, plenty of different caveats to make it tough. The other thing that he did was a ton of public works projects. These building programs provided jobs for a lot of people within the city. He was building it was like a temple to Venus, of course.
But let's not pretend there wasn't a Caesar amphitheater and a Caesar theater and a Caesar this and a Caesar, and like shit to himself and his statues and...
Sulla did it.
Yeah. At the same time, you're doing stuff, he is doing this public works, and from the perception of the outside and everything like that, the moves that he's making now they do seem favorable. But at a certain point, when he's doing unfavorable things, he still has that same control and that same say. No one's able to question him. And I mean, the spoiler alert, guys, he gets assassinated. I mean, if you don't know that, I'm sorry, but I mean, the plan to go ahead and do that was being planned all the way in 45 BC, and it doesn't happen till the next year?
Yeah. a lot of the things that start falling out of his favor is there was a fight in the Senate over giving him the title of Rex, which was king, something that they have avoided doing for hundreds of years, creating another king.
No kings.
There were 2 tribunes that had basically opposed it and shot it down. And somehow Caesar found a reason to expel both of these tribunes from the Senate.
Doesn't look good.
Especially because those were the ones that were voted in by the public.
Yeah.
These weren't just regular tribunes. These were the ones that had a say in it. In early 44, he assumed the title of Dictator Perpetua, like we talked about. It caused more problems because now he's the dictator for life. Sounds a lot like a king, doesn't it? Sounds a lot like maybe that's what you're going for. There's this festival that happens that has a very, convenient story behind it, where he's sitting up on a throne and Mark Antony, probably trying to get back in his favor, sneaks up behind him and sets this crown on his head in front of all the people, and there's a silence that falls over the crowd.
I like to imagine it's more so like Mark Antony. It sneaks up behind him and Caesar doesn't see him, and he just reaches over to start lowering, and he just is the crowd. You just hear him go, and then he kind of pulls it off, and they're like, ah. He goes to lower back down. They're like, and then Caesar finally looks up and realizes what's going on and kind of like shoos it away a little bit, gauging the crowd reaction.
Yeah, and had the crowd seen that crown and started cheering and going nuts,
would have gone straight on his fucking head.
Good chance that would have
never
been
left.
But yeah, of course, once he realized that maybe everybody wasn't in favor of it, he shoos Mark Antony away with it. These celebrations rubbed Brutus and Cassius.
He's like, you need to read the room.
Yeah, they began looking at this situation like, all right, he just took over dictator for life. We just had this weird crown king incident that he seems to have shooed off.
He can only, I mean, at this point, I don't know how you solidify power even more, but at a certain point, you're unchallengeable. And at that point, I think they were just like, okay, if we're going to do this, it has to be now. Like, if we wait any longer, we're not going to probably have an opportunity to do this.
Well, and something that makes the crown story more interesting is Brutus and Cassius go to Mark Antony with this plot.
Yeah.
Mark Antony declines to join this group of conspirators. At the same time, he knows the plan, and he's mum. He doesn't say shit.
In 40 or by 44, they had, I think, 60 conspirators.
I thought it was 6, wasn't it?
By 44, there were 60.
That's a lot. There were even Caesarians that were in on it too, right?
Yeah, I mean, because they again, you can support one thing without the person. If you're saying that, you're just kind of on the side of what that person is kind of doing politically, I guess. The same way that, you can identify as either or and kind of pick and choose.
The other thing you forget too is it's easy to become a conspirator when you were one of the other consular candidates that were trying to run against Caesar when he was out fighting and just kept claiming the dictatorship. Like, you're rubbing a lot of people the wrong way when they want to be counselor, and all of a sudden you're just like, no. I don't need 2 of me. I have 1 of me, and that's enough, and he's going to be a dictator.
And there's so many different stories that go along with this. This is when there's a lot of just like interpretation of what could have happened, what did happen leading up to it. There's talk that someone had passed him a note, like when he was on his way. He had talked to a soothsayer who had previously told him, beware the Ides of March. That's where we get that saying. March 15th is essentially a day he's saying is not going to go well for him. And, there's talk of he wakes up that morning and he's not feeling good, or the day before, and one of the guys comes to him that's in on the plot. It's like, hey, you can't miss this, man. There's going to be a lot of important stuff talked about.
His wife had a dream that he would be murdered.
That he was going to be murdered. He's on his way to where they're going to be meeting. And it's not essentially the normal Senate house where they usually meet. It's essentially like temple or like some type of like, what am I trying to say? Like,
it was an amphitheater.
Civic building or something like that was built for Pompey, and that had like a statue of Pompey. And weirdly enough, that spot was not inside the traditional consideration of what those Roman areas were, where you couldn't brandish a sword or anything. So all the guys have knives or daggers, so you're not fucking carrying around a sword. But he ends up showing up to this place, and as he's going there, someone passes him a note and is like, you need to read this right now. And he doesn't read the note. He passes the soothsayer and he looks down at him and he's like, Ides of March, I'm still here. And the guy mutters back something. It's much more eloquent than this.
The Oracle had given him a warning earlier.
And had said to him, like, bitch, there's still time left in the day, but it's basically the day has not finished yet.
Yeah.
And so he goes into what he is expecting to be this just kind of normal. He's going to zone out because no one's saying anything that he needs to hear, and he'll sit there for a couple hours and then peace out.
Pretty smart, because this whole plot to do this during a Senate meeting meant that there was nobody outside of the rank of a Senate person that was allowed in the room. So that means no bodyguards.
And no weapons.
Yep.
Supposedly.
But if you're wearing tunics and you're wearing big robes, you can hide a dagger pretty easily, and it's not going to take too much to do anything. So he's hearing an argument from somebody about a brother that had been, I guess, exiled, bringing him back into Rome and letting him come back in. And there was supposed to be...
I know he got caught fucking corpses of horses.
He's a good guy.
But he's a good guy.
We've all had those mistakes, right? It's like, no, I fuck everybody's wife. Horses, that's stupid. And maybe a king.
They're warm and they're human. I don't know how's that hard.
Supposedly the signal was the man was to reach up and grab the shoulder off of his robe and pull it down.
Shoulder down or something.
Yep. And as soon as he did, there was a first stabbing motion that went towards Caesar, and I believe it hit him maybe in the leg, the thigh, somewhere. This is where things get murky.
Yeah, so there's stories that he, when the guy pulled his robe down and everything, he went to go stab him, and Caesar put his pen or a stylus or something like that, put it through the guy's hand. But that being the signal, all the guys that were around him and a bunch of people had gathered around him because this seemed like it was this heated debate and it was stirring up people. And as they were surrounding him, everyone just started going fucking stab happy on him. And then was it the final one?
Brutus.
I mean, they say, but Brutus approaches him, and this is where you get variations of what he may have said. They said that he actually said the last words in Greek, which were a big deal.
And you, Brutus?
And you, Brutus, and you, child, you too, Brutus, a tu, Brute, whatever it is. But Brutus basically stabs him, not in the dick, but in the groin, which I don't know if you've been stabbed that many times already, being the last, you think you'd be down on your knees unless you're being held up by everybody. But still, you're stabbing down at the dick. What are we doing here?
Yeah, I'd like to give Brutus the benefit of a doubt, knowing kind of what they knew.
My mother.
True. Yeah, maybe that was it. Maybe he was trying to cut his dick off.
Can't fuck her now.
Or he was aiming for an artery. I mean, they probably had that knowledge by then to know that there were major areas of blood
This
flow.
one makes more red. Yeah. All in all, I think it was around 23 stab wounds that were discovered on his body.
Supposedly 23 conspirators, supposedly 23 stab wounds.
Something like that.
The numbers vary widely.
And just because there were 60 doesn't mean that all those were guys that had known about it. You could consider Mark Antony a conspirator.
Yeah.
In fact, even before the meeting, there were no guards in there, but someone had actually distracted Mark Antony and kept him outside or something like that while it was happening.
If he knew the plot, he probably.
And as this happens, all of a sudden, there's this huge uproar. Shit's going crazy. The side that's the pro-Caesarians are essentially the other guys got daggers and shit, but they're fucking getting ready to fight. Mark Antony comes in and basically tries to kind of cool shit down. And he's like, hey, we can't do this right now. Of course, he's probably like, what the fuck is going on? But he knows
this good for me?
Yeah, that this can't erupt. At the same time, he had to walk in and been like, oh, you guys did it. It couldn't be a total shock because he kind of knew something might be going down. He's like, oh, now? I thought you guys would, this is next week or something.
You guys lied to me about the plan.
At the same time, I kind of understand it a little bit better now that we're talking about it. He comes in, sees that something he was aware of actually has happened.
Yeah.
And in his head, he's thinking, they know that I knew about this. What does this implicate me as far as, because if these guys end up getting pulled in and all of a sudden they're getting questioned right at this moment, they're going to say, well, Brutus knew about this. We talked to him about this.
He didn't stop it.
Yeah,
he
exactly.
Didn't tell us no.
So he's got to kind of cool down the situation. And then basically there's kind of this mixed reaction of no one really knows how to react, because to the normal people, Caesar was doing kind of well for them. And all of a sudden now these senators have killed him. There's all of this kind of all this stuff's up in the air.
Yeah.
Like what's supposed to happen at this point. They throw this huge funeral for him. They display the actual robes that are like soaked in blood and everything like that for people to see. They end up holding it in this place that, he's on a funeral pyre, or he's on this like velvet or satin couch, like for everyone to be able to look at.
Mm-hmm.
And during the eulogy, Brutus, having had some time to kind of get a feel of the situation and like kind of what his role was and
craft his
narrative, he gets up there and basically just pours gas all over these fucking conspirators and is like, these people robbed us of Caesar and all this kind of stuff, and basically kind of turns the mob on a lot of these guys.
Yeah, I mean, it's every man for yourself after a situation like that. And if you get the pulpit, just like Caesar did to bring back Gaius into the mind's eye, if Brutus could maybe turn things away from him and towards everybody else, who are you going to believe? Are you going to believe the conspirators saying, no, that was the guy that talked me into this? Or are you going to believe the guy that just pointed at everybody else?
So he was 50 or 55. I can't remember which. He would have been 55 because this happened in 44.
Yep.
He's 55 when this happens, and they end up getting rid of him. But I think kind of what they didn't anticipate is when he went out, he wasn't going out a villain. They saw, being in that position. I'm not saying who's right or who's wrong. I don't like dictators. So I'm going to say in this situation, yeah, the guy had to fucking die because that's what he was. The perception, though, is that at the time he went out, he was doing well. He was doing well for the people. So nothing had been soured on this emperor role or this dictator role, this all-encompassing role. And the people obviously didn't think too harshly about it because it doesn't take until there's the formation of what's called the Third Triumvirate, which takes place between Octavian, Mark Antony, and Lepidus. So we get some people that were tied to Caesar, like the new generation coming in.
Well, and Octavian was his nephew?
Was his grandson or grandnephew? Grandnephew.
Grandnephew?
It was his grandnephew. So he had that pedigree. And they end up forming this triumvirate. Mark Antony goes and does his shit with Cleopatra. They end up...
Yeah, he does.
Yeah, he does. He ends up dying, then she kills herself. We'll talk about that all later. And then in 27 BC, Octavian, who then becomes Augustus, who the month of August is named after him, is made emperor. So nothing was soured, and Rome ends up, the Republic is dead, and then becomes essentially a kind of a monarchy.
Yeah, and you fall back into this kind of kingship again, and this is, again, we're so close to zero. We're so close to the birth of Jesus. We're so close to his resurrection, or his crucifixion at the hands of the Romans, and Christianity being pushed back against and pushed into the shadows, and Constantine bringing it out of the shadows and making it the official religion of Rome. This all takes place before that. It's so nuts
less
that
than
we
50
go back
years
into
between Caesar and Jesus. If the actual fictional, or not fictional, historical person, if he existed, and everything like that. But as far as that goes, less than 50 years apart.
Yeah,
which means there are people alive that were like, I remember Caesar and I remember hearing about this guy, which is nuts. It's crazy how vast history is, and then how condensed it can be at times.
Yeah, and from all the research that I did, there's an argument to be made that Octavian was just as good, if not maybe a better ruler than Caesar.
Well, he becomes Augustus.
I'm excited for Augustus and to hear more about him and just how he did it. But yeah, he was named the successor after he became dictator virtuoso, or whatever the fuck they wanted to call it, perpetuoso. So it wasn't there. Elections weren't going to be held again.
Yeah.
This was already kind of a predetermined thing that was happening. And again, this is just a section, a small section of the Roman Empire.
Yes, it's nuts. A lot more Rome to come. We hope you guys enjoyed this visit to Rome in this period.
Yeah, long one.
You got anything else?
No, I think we're good on Caesar.
All right, guys. Now. Well, thanks for joining us for 3 hours and 20 minutes of nothing of just straight Caesar. Catch you on the next one. Have a great night. Have a great weekend. Whatever you're doing, enjoy your commute.
Peace.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us for another episode. If you like what you heard, hit that subscribe and like button. Follow us. If you didn't like what you heard, still hit that anyway, because we'll probably cover something in the future that you do like. Please follow us on our social media. Adam, hit him with it.
Our Instagram is Historically High Pod, Historically High POD, and we are on Twitter at Historically High. That's Historically HI.
All right. And if you guys want to send in any feedback, suggestions, hit us up on those two, or you can even do it on Gmail. It's historicallyhighpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks again.
Peace.